In the past decade, the internet has seen the rise of a new genre of horror. This resulted in a new cultural phenomenon, giving rise to works such as Local 58, The Walton Files, Gemini Home Entertainment, and so much more, right here on YouTube. Although each of them is unique in their own way, they all fall under the same general umbrella: analog horror. A few years ago, a new series appeared that hardly anyone was talking about at the time. It truly seemed to me that aside from a few reactions from large content creators, the series had simply fallen under the radar. Nowadays, though, it's known as one of the giants of analog horror, Vita Carnis by Darian Quilloy. This series has a very special place in my heart. I really owe a lot to it. Without the video I made on it, I probably wouldn't be doing YouTube full-time today. Though even disregarding all that, it's also just really damn good. Darian managed to hit the ground running with an amazing premise, detailed world building, lovable and dangerous creatures, and of course, an engaging mystery hidden underneath the surface of each and every episode. Today, I want to bring you through both seasons, analyzing every little detail in an effort to find out what's going on in the fleshed out world of Vita Carnis. At the end of the video, I'll use everything we learned to create an ultimate timeline of events and make theories about the questions that remain. Before we begin, I'd like to direct you to Darian's channel and Ko-fi, which will be at the top of the description. Please make sure to support Darian's phenomenal work. With all that out of the way, let's begin our deep dive into Vita Carnis. The first 7 entries in Vita Carnis are part of a research documentary from the National Living Meat Research Organization. This documentary consists of 8 parts, and the only way to view the final part is to watch the entire compiled documentary. So we'll be starting from there.
On planet Earth, life has thrived for millions of years. Creatures big and small have found ways to adapt and evolve to flourish in all types of environments. From barren wastes to lush forests, life can be found. Earth has homed these creatures since the dawn of life itself. Only until very recently, things have changed.
It opens with a description of the beauty of nature and evolution. But in 1931, a new type of organism began to rapidly populate the planet, seemingly out of thin air. Despite speculation that they may be supernatural or extraterrestrial in origin, apparently neither of those are the case, as they are native to Earth. It then goes on to describe the creatures as being mostly composed of muscle, organs, and bone, appearing very similarly to mammals lacking skin or store-bought meat. Due to the aforementioned characteristics, the species has been aptly named Vita Carnis, Latin for living flesh. Their diet mainly consists of eating the flesh of other mammals, though any organic matter seems to be viable. Despite that, they don't ever seem to consume any of their own kind. Of the 8 known types of Vita Carnis, the first is the crawl. Crawl is a plant-like organism that grows similar to vines or fungi, with a dark red appearance. The ends of its tendrils gather organic material and nutrients from the surrounding area. It also has a rudimentary form of photosynthesis it can use to supplement itself. Because of just how efficient its natural processes are, it can thrive in almost any possible environment on the planet. Because the dead branches fall off and decay into nutrient-rich soil, it actually benefits the ecosystem around it immensely, as opposed to taking over, as you might assume. It's even cultivated by humans as a sort of super fertilizer. And although it's said to be a sustainable food source for humans, apparently it just doesn't taste very good. Occasionally, a small node or bud will grow on a branch of crawl, and eventually, this bud breaks off and will grow into its own independent organism. And this is where the next species comes into play. When a crawl bud grows into a trimming, they proceed to seek out anything organic they can find to eat, and eventually grow into small, skinless mammals, approximately the size and stature of a raccoon. Every individual trimming is unique. The only characteristics that they all share is being about the size of a basketball, and also the fact that they're mostly made of muscle and meat tissue. They reach maturity at 7 months and have a maximum lifespan of 2 to 4 years. To most, they're more of a nuisance than anything else, screeching when feeling threatened and scavenging through people's trash to look for food. Due to its timid nature and lack of defensive capability, it's near the bottom of the food chain. Because of this, they highly benefit any ecosystem with predators. Despite this, their population is never in danger, as they can be found in abundance wherever crawl can be found. Despite humans struggling to find a proper method of incorporating them into society due to their annoyance, some people found that keeping them as pets was actually a pleasant idea. Next on the list is the meat snake. The meat snake also branches off from the crawl at a young age, and it consists of various types of meat coated in a transparent, skin-like membrane. Once mature, it averages about 16 feet, but also can grow far larger depending on outlying factors. Because of its lack of appendages and slow movement, it is incapable of feeding on larger animals, and as a result, is relegated to a scavenger. It is not hostile, only really defending itself when threatened or while feeding. The food that it eats gets broken down in the stomach for nutrients and sustenance, and the rest of it moves down the digestive system to the end of the snake and becomes incorporated into its own structure. It also has a very unique property of borrowing and using the skull of its prey as its own. During its life, it will swap and replace its skull as needed. The meat snake has no natural predators and can only be killed through starvation, burning, or destruction of its skin membrane. If it determines its size to be excessive and other conditions are met, it will split into 2 smaller meat snakes through mitosis, and they will then go their separate ways. Meat snakes can only be found in moderate temperatures. As such, they are not nearly as common as the aforementioned crawl and trimmings. Humanity has managed to find a use for them, as they can be used to get rid of large amounts of unwanted bodies or carcasses and prevent the spread of disease in the process, as the enzymes in their stomach will sterilize anything that they excrete. Overall, despite their unsightly appearance, meat snakes really are harmless to humans, as long as you don't mind the smell. The next member of the Vita Carnis is the mimic. This creature has the most humanoid appearance. Their fingers and limbs are disproportionately large, and they have giant, bulging eyes. Their teeth are almost entirely composed of incisors, which are the type used most for cutting and slicing. Along with their gaping jaw, they're perfectly set up for swallowing large chunks of flesh, which is awfully convenient considering their diet consists entirely of humans. Because of this, they're only found around areas with human populations, of course. Its life cycle begins as a crawl offshoot, very similarly to the trimming. As they grow, they progress from smaller to larger and larger animals, eventually preferring to hunt humans. The mimic is actually very intelligent. They hunt for easy targets and will actually stalk you to learn your routine and attack you when you're most vulnerable. They're even known to use objects such as clothes, furniture, or even mannequins to conceal themselves. Because people are generally most vulnerable at night when they're sleeping, this is when they prefer to strike. Once you're asleep, they'll silently approach you and then attack and kill you near instantly and begin to feed. If you aren't asleep, then it's even worse. They'll use a repertoire of sounds to startle and coerce you into a corner, and then swiftly attack and do the thing. After eating its fill, it will swiftly vacate populated areas into a place where it won't be disturbed, and begin to digest their meal. If a mimic has a consistent supply of humans, it will eventually begin to exhibit characteristics of humans, growing skin and hair. Eventually, it will look almost identical to a human, making it possible for it to simply blend in with human civilization. However, if a mimic has an overabundance of humans to feed on, then something different happens. It will evolve into an elder mimic, and it becomes an even more efficient hunter. Its skin becomes dark, teeth recede from its mouth to its throat, and it grows a strange, mask-like pale skin over its face. Since mimics are obviously a natural predator to humans, world governments have released instructions to the public on how to combat them. Number 1. Don't travel alone, especially in areas known to have mimic sightings. Number 2. If you encounter a stationary mimic that seems undisturbed by your presence, it's likely digesting a meal. Quietly and swiftly leave the location and alert authorities. Number 3. If a mimic pursues you at all costs, do not get yourself into a position where the possibility of being cornered even exists. If they can't trap you, they're not even going to bother giving chase. Number 4. If a conflict with a mimic is inevitable, roll into a ball protecting your vital points and make as much noise as possible to alert the surrounding area. Number 5. If you have a weapon, there's no point in using it. Mimics are incredibly resilient and are unlikely to be fazed by general attacks. Instead, use it as a barrier between you and the mimic. Number 6. If a mimic is present but hasn't seen you, hide behind or under natural cover or furniture in a low position. Before long, they should leave to try and find prey elsewhere. Armed with this knowledge, you can hope to avoid a deadly fate in an encounter with a mimic. Moving on, we have the Harvester. Occasionally, a crawl bud will not break off, but rather grow continuously until transforming into the Harvester. The Harvester will then produce its own tendrils independent of the crawl. Harvester bulbs are about 10 feet tall and 7 feet wide, but their two types of tendrils extend underground for up to nearly 500 feet. The first type of tendril is a barbed one that contains 2 potent venoms with no known cure. One side of the barbs excretes an anticoagulant and the other a neurotoxin. The second type of tendril is similar in composition to the crawl branches, and it's used to drag prey caught in the first tendril set underground for decomposition and consumption. After feeding on a corpse under the surface, the ground surrounding it becomes nutrient-rich, promoting plant growth and attracting small animals. The Harvester has a strange tendency to not attack these smaller animals, though. There are 3 possible reasons as to why this could be. It may determine that the energy expenditure is not worth the effort, or it purposefully leaves them to attract larger animals, or even both. Harvesters are rather rare, primarily being found in wooded forests in the northern hemisphere. Because of this, you're pretty unlikely to encounter one unless you're hiking, and warning signs should be present regardless. If you find yourself in an area with excessive greenery and a suspicious lack of wildlife, it's entirely possible you've stumbled upon the territory of a Harvester. If you confirm this to be the case, the most important thing to do is to not panic. Any sudden movements will spell certain death for you. In order to escape, you can throw away any hefty items on your person in an attempt to distract the Harvester. From there, you should slowly shuffle away and hope that it works. And once you're absolutely sure you're out of the range, you can make your escape. The final conventional species is the Host of Influence, or just Host for short. The hosts are incredibly rare, found solely in North America, and only 2 pictures of them alive even exist. It's vaguely humanoid with its head, arm-like appendages, and torso, but everything from the navel down are plant-like tendrils that allow it to burrow into the ground. It has some armor-like meat plates to cover areas of exposure, and its mouth slit sits near the neck muscles. Its back has many hair-like structures that act as nozzles to emit spores. The spores themselves are incredibly hazardous and can be carried large distances by the wind. If inhaled by a person, they'll begin to succumb to ever-worsening symptoms after a few hours, eventually becoming entranced. The infected person will then attempt to make their way to the host who, and if they succeed, will offer themselves up as a meal to the host. If the infected person doesn't reach the host within 36 hours of infection, then the symptoms will slowly begin to fade, and the person will return to normal. If a host determines that its location is not sufficient for acquiring meals, it will uproot itself and relocate to another spot it deems fit. The last two members of the Vita Carnis are perhaps the strangest and most unique. The first of these two is the monoliths, which are pretty peculiar for a variety of reasons. For one, they only showed up in June of 1972 on an exactly 7 of them arranging themselves in a circle about a mile in diameter. They're nearly 400 feet tall and don't move or do much of anything, with the exception of a single documented instance in which a team attempted to approach the city that they encircle, which caused the monoliths to become extremely aggressive. Upon the government learning of this, the military attempted to EMP blasted, regenerating the taken damage pretty much immediately. Following this, they fenced the area off and barred any members of the public from returning, likely inciting an evacuation for the existing human-developed area that was there before they showed up. The 8th and final member is the Vita Carnis, otherwise known as the Singularity. The Singularity does not share any known qualities with the other Carnis members, and little about it is understood. It appears as a glistening orb about 3 feet in diameter and suspends itself in the air using an unknown force. It's known to emit magnetic pulses and unknown energy signals at regular frequencies for reasons unknown. The population is also unknown. It's implied that a lot more is known about the Singularity than is let on, but most of the info has been confiscated by the government, and the group putting together this research documentary was only able to find one file, given to them by
marvelous and majestic world that exists today. It's as extraordinary to have such strange and mysterious beings appear all around us. Thank you for joining us on this journey of exploration and discovery of the lives of these living meat creatures.
So, that was a pretty absurd amount of information to digest, huh? Okay, so, the Vita Carnis are a mysterious group of living meat organisms that suddenly appeared in the early 1930s, bursting onto the natural ecosystem and flipping our understanding of nature and evolution on its head. We have been told directly that they are not of extraterrestrial or supernatural origin, but are rather of Earth, making it all the more confusing as to how they just showed up one day. We can gain some further insight regarding each of them if we translate their Latin names. The crawl's Latin name, which is Scandere Carnis, basically just translates to climbing flesh, which makes sense because it grows like a vine. The trimming is Ignivis Carnis, lazy flesh. The meat snake is Mutuari Carnis, tubaro flesh. The mimic is Trucidatum Carnis, the slaughter of flesh. Yeah, that makes sense. The harvester is Congregentur Carnis, or gathering of flesh. Yeah, that's the first one that doesn't really make sense, but I promise it will later. Continuing, the host of influence is Imperium Carnis, which either means empire or commander of the flesh, referencing their ability to hypnotize and command their victims. The monoliths are Coelum Carnis, or flesh of the heavens. And finally, the Singularity is Verum Carnis, or the true flesh. That's got some implications. We'll put a pin on that. On top of that, I think it's worth noting that they're listed in the documentary in order of increasing rarity. We start with the crawl and trimmings, which are basically identical, and then we move down to the meat snake and the mimic, and harvesters is where it gets rare. With the hosts, they don't really have any idea how many there are. Then we have the monoliths, of which there are 7, and the Singularity seems like it's just the one. Probably the most important detail to discuss from this first episode is the island in the Hudson Bay that does not exist in the real world. This is where the monoliths are gathered, and suspiciously, there are exactly 7 of them to match the 7 Carnis species. Not only that, but the monoliths are also the only ones who've explicitly arrived later than the rest of the Carnis, approximately 40 years later. And I'm sure it's just a coincidence that this also seems to coincide with their second population explosion. Clearly, this island and its inhabitants should be of great interest to us. But as it stands, we know almost nothing about it, due to governments shutting out the public after the attempt at military intervention gone wrong. For our final takeaway, this first entry is focused greatly on giving us a meticulous look at how each of the Vita Carnis functions, certainly a masterful way to introduce the audience to the universe. And I think you'll come to find that one of the reasons why this series is so good is because it spends so much time at the beginning establishing these interesting and unique concepts, and now we get to explore the rest of the world contextualized through the rules that have been set. With the pieces in play, let's move on to the next episode.
This could be the greatest discovery of the age.
Baby. Let this feeling in.
Have any information of the whereabouts of...
In a dramatic tonal shift, this episode has us watching someone flip through channels in the late 80s. The viewer has stumbled across a cook-at-home TV show, and the recipe features the crawl as the dish's primary protein. While the ingredients are being listed, a special flavor enhancer from the Nutrier company is referenced, supposedly the most crucial ingredient of all. Most of the rest of the video seems fairly normal, actually. We get to see what crawl looks like as a cooking ingredient, and the process of putting the dish together doesn't seem too out of the ordinary despite sanitary concerns. And hold up, is that guy wearing a gas mask? Unfortunately, that's not the only thing that doesn't seem quite right. At the end, the music becomes off-key and unsettling, and the voice says,
Finish preparing the dish with your flavor enhancer, but allow your dish to cool to a temperature below 60 degrees Celsius, or else the enhancer will not work.
After those two hiccups, the program concludes, and the viewer turns off the television. Static slowly crescendos as an image fades in from the darkness, until the video abruptly ends. Although this was much shorter than the documentary, it still yields a lot of intriguing bits of information. At the forefront of it all is this suspicious Nutrier Co. and their suspicious flavor enhancer. First of all, Nutrier is Latin for nourish, so it immediately establishes a consistency with the Vita Carnis. Second, the easy conclusion to draw with its appearance is that this has something to do with the spores from the host of influence. The cook in the video is also wearing a full-body suit and gas mask, which tells us that whoever this is, they do not seem interested in actually ingesting anything they're cooking with, which is funny because they're cooking. It's meant to be eaten. Now, something I've purposely neglected mentioning until now is the brief PSA for a wanted individual named Vincent Barrar, which appeared at the beginning during the channel flipping. It's clearly a high-profile case. He's wanted by the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. His alleged crimes are interprovincial travel and production of sensitive material. We don't currently have any context regarding the person or their situation, but wait, yes, we do. At the beginning of the research documentary, there is a warning that the documentary itself is classified material. They even go as far to say that the penalty of being caught in possession of it is $500,000. After accounting for inflation and exchange rates, this is over $1 million US. That's a bit absurd, isn't it? But it goes deeper. That image we could barely see from the end of the episode, it was the start of an evidence board, with the Nutrier logo placed at its very center. If all of this information regarding the Vita Carnis from the documentary is classified, we have to question why that is. Why would the government want to hide that information, much of which pertains to public safety? Another thing we must ask ourselves is, who in their right mind would have the audacity to oppose the government in this fashion? And is their name Vincent Barrar? With all the information gleaned from this episode, it's perfectly clear that we've entered the beginning of a vast conspiracy involving the Vita Carnis. A rabbit hole has opened before us. Anyways, what if we kept them as pets? The next entry is Guide to Owning a Pet Trimming. Similar to the previous, this is a televised program that's being watched by an individual. It begins by introducing other common pets known for having human companionship, and then alongside them introduces the trimming. It then transitions into the steps required to take care of a trimming pet. And I have to stop and say, the trimming prop that Darian made for this video is absolutely phenomenal. Kudos to him for that. The guide emphasizes that the most important thing for a trimming's comfort is the temperature of their environment. Though they are resilient in various temperatures, they're most comfortable at a nice cool temperature of about 64 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, I don't know about you, but this is a bit colder than I personally keep my living space. However, it is also said that they actually prefer warmer environments to nest or sleep. The easiest setup is a box with enough blankets for them to cover themselves. For food, dry cat or dog food twice a day seems perfectly fine for healthy trimming, but you can feed them any food scraps as a treat as well. They'll basically eat anything. Next, the guide says that it's very important to remember that they're nocturnal and make a bunch of noise, and, okay. As a solution, it proposes to feed the trimming in the early morning so it's active during these times instead of when you might want to be sleeping. You should also make sure a trimming has plenty of space and access to a backyard. If not, regular walks are encouraged. This is especially the case because trimmings are social creatures, and walks will allow them to meet other trimmings. Though they are relatively inactive, they can enjoy simple toys to be pushed around, carried, or pulled. Another social aspect they enjoy is listening to the TV or radio.
They love seeing and listening to all the funny things coming from the devices.
When they get dirty, you just have to give them a simple bath. Make sure to avoid getting soap in their eyes, nose, or mouth. Finally, the guide says to make sure you give them lots of love and care. They love being cuddled, getting pat on the head, and talking to them also makes them happy. Finally, it notes that their lifespan is about 8 to 12 years. After it ends, the TV is turned off and we hear sounds of writing. Then it ends. This time around, there's not much to gather from something like this lighthearted episode, but there was definitely a clear emphasis on the trimming's relationship with radio and TV devices, and the mention of an ideal temperature range has come up once again. Not only that, but originally, the research documentary said trimmings live 2 to 4 years, but this guide inflates that statistic dramatically. That's strange. I doubt it means anything. Well, that's all I have to say regarding this short and sweet episode. Let's move on to the next entry, MeatSnakeSpecimen archived footage. It begins with a black screen and the sounds of someone fumbling with a VHS tape, until the tape is inserted and the tape starts with a warning message. The unauthorized reproduction, distribution, or viewing of the following footage is strictly prohibited. Infringement of these instructions leads to severe penalties enforced by federal law. Discard this tape immediately. The tape describes a situation that occurred at the end of World War II, all the way back in 1945. While exploring an underground tunnel, a cleanup team discovered a supermassive meat snake, so large that it was stuck in place, acting as an impenetrable wall. And it wasn't just large, it was over 6 times the average length. Contrasting their general behavior, this particular meat snake moved so little that it was as if it was dead, presumably to conserve energy since its mass was so large. Its mouth had cow skulls arranged in a circular fashion, and its skin was a dark maroon, as opposed to the general bright red. And it also displayed remarkable resistance to extreme temperature and radiation. Well, there goes that potential weakness. When the other side of the meat snake was found by a separate team, they made a grotesque discovery, which explained how it got so large in the first place. It had eaten countless soldier corpses. And to make matters worse, despite being motionless when it was discovered, one day it was just gone. At the end of the tape, the visuals distort and we see 2 things of interest. A man in a uniform and the previously shown illustration, focusing on a secret room underneath a tunnel. And then the TV shuts off. You may not believe me, but this occurrence was not unprecedented. When we were introduced to the meat snake, it was explicitly stated that they could grow much larger during instances of natural disaster, war, and plague, as they'd be free to feast on human corpses left unchecked. In fact, this incident was probably one of the first occurrences that could inform that fact, which would later appear in the documentary. However, this isn't exactly what happened. The redacted room underneath the tunnel was not redacted for no reason. The The man with the censored face, Neutrier logo on his badge, that wasn't shown to us for no reason. I'm sure it's just a coincidence that the mouth of this meat snake had 7 skulls, arranged in a familiar shape, right? Wrong. This was deliberate, organized cult activity. And I know this for certain because it was shown to us as an Easter egg only briefly appearing in video all the way back in the research documentary. And that's not the only thing I've purposely neglected to mention. Radio towers being overcome by Krull, a 400 trimming infestation on an abandoned satellite dish, a deadly attack on a family by the hands of a harvester where the authorities refused to do anything about it, and 2 chilling images, the Neutrier logo and 2 devout worshippers shown in sequence with each other. The story was always deeper than what I was letting on. I just didn't frame it that way because that's exactly what the series does too. If you aren't paying attention, there's just a lot of stuff you'll miss, but we've arrived at a point of no return. It can no longer be ignored. The next entry in the series is Mimic Defense Instructional Tape. It begins with an emergency warning, PSA. The narrator describes an increase in missing persons as of October 23, 1986, due to an increase in mimic population. This specific tape is publicly released by the Canadian government in an effort to educate the public on how to avoid being killed. It begins by talking about mimic behaviors we're already aware of. However, we're provided with new images to show just how good they actually are at hiding in furniture. Great. We also learn that the reason why they can do this despite being so large is that they're able to contort their body at will, making themselves smaller to fit in tight spaces and larger to appear threatening when appropriate. Great. We also learn in more detail why and how they put on clothes to disguise themselves. Their bright red skin and bulging eyes are dead giveaways for their identity, so they use this to hide in densely populated areas. We also get clarification on the evolved human-appearing mimics. They still maintain features such as their smile, bulging eyes, and disproportionately large appendages no matter what, so it's never impossible to identify them. Since mimic legs are long and hunched, their walking pattern is also identifiable as irregular. The video then transitions into a section on how to defend yourself against them. If a mimic is before you, it's best to appear large, maintain eye contact, and make lots of noise. If you have a weapon such as a gun, you should aim for the legs and head to immobilize them. The video reiterates that if you find a mimic who hasn't noticed you, you should try to get away without making yourself known and call the authorities. If it does notice you, you're instructed to simply run or hide. You're not supposed to leave your hiding spot until authorities have arrived. After this, the instructional tape ends. But another tape begins. Evidence tape, Christopher and Janice case, 1983. Observe footage for confidential information. Completed. Discard and destroy all copies of this tape immediately.
Got it. Let's see. Yep, it's working.
This tape begins with Christopher figuring out how to use his newly acquired camcorder. He seems to be recording a nighttime stroll along with another person, Janice. Since it's so dark, he turns on a flashlight and then turns the camera to Janice, and we see that the faces in this footage are censored in post. Most of the footage is them engaging in casual conversation.
Are you sure we should be out this late?
Fine. I'll cook you stuff when we get home. Don't worry.
I'm hungry.
At about 7 minutes, the recording resets, and he says that the camera turns off and on randomly sometimes. From now on, the recording will occasionally cut off randomly for small periods of time.
Hopefully there are lights out there. Like, people still live there, right? Can't be that bad.
Pretty dark to me.
Now, you might be confused as to where they're even going or why they're out here, and Janice asks the same question.
So, what are we doing out here exactly?
Well, supposedly they found some guy. It was like a grody scene, like it was disgusting. They had to get rid of the trailer he was in, and then like they didn't let anyone nearby, and it was like this big conspiracy. So I'm filming that. Hopefully I get a good mark for it.
Alright, so now it makes a bit more sense. Chris is likely a student who has to research a certain event, and he so happened to live within walking distance of where the event occurred. So they're attempting to find the trailer park in which it happened, I guess just as a bit of extra effort to secure a good grade on the project. Seems reasonable enough.
You know where we're going?
Yeah, we're almost there. We're on the road. We're right next to it. It's literally up there.
Okay.
I don't want to be out here either. It's a weird place.
On the way, they encounter an old buried car and stop to observe it.
Like, we could get a shot of this in, like, atmosphere, you know? There we go. Yeah, look at that. That's cool. Hey, look, there's, like, old stuff here as well.
After some more uneventful walking through the woods, they arrive at the place they were looking for, but everything is gone.
This is where everyone was. There's no one here now, though. There's no one here. It's the strangest thing.
Once they reach the exact spot they were looking for, he passes the camera to Janice, and she starts filming him. He then describes what happened.
In the year 1980, a teenage boy was coming home from his trailer late night. Although, when he arrived at home, he found a grisly scene. Detail Barar, his father that he came home to, was found dead. Police were called, and they came to investigate. Strange thing though, they immediately closed off everything. No one was allowed near, but only a few witnesses saw what truly happened there. For some reason, the police were acting very weird and trying to keep everyone away and telling little information. And when the information was released to the public, they say it was a suicide. But the witnesses that did catch an eye of what happened say the scene was much too grisly to be that. The trailer and most people living nearby moved away pretty much immediately. Police haven't come out about anything yet. So that's why I'm here to answer what truly happened. And that's it for now.
You said grizzly way too much.
What?
You said grizzly way too much.
Too much?
Yeah.
Okay, should I retry?
From there, they go for a few more takes and then decide they're done and continue walking.
Yeah, because like back there was the perfect time for a serial killer to just jump out and grab us, you know?
Cut it out. It's scary enough as is.
After voicing how much she didn't like Chris's joke, Janice realizes something.
Chris?
He isn't responding to her.
Where are you? Chris! Come on! This isn't funny!
Chris is just gone.
Fine. I guess I'm going home without you. I'm cold, tired, and hungry. If you want to stay out here and play games, you can.
She assumes he's playing games because of what he just said, but then over a minute of silence. Just her footsteps. And then...
Chris? What are you doing? Chris, this isn't funny. God!
This video is pretty long, so there's a lot to unpack here. First, we have the PSA, the first half of the video. Now, you may have noticed by now, but much of the information we were given in the PSA directly clashes with established rules and protocols we learned in the research documentary. This is no coincidence, as shortly into the PSA there is a frame with the Latin word abbreviatus, which pretty obviously translates to abbreviated. In other words, we're not being told the whole truth, and that becomes pretty damn evident once you begin to cross-examine. For example, in the research documentary, we're told that mimics fed a steady diet of humans can come to look almost identical to humans, but in the PSA, we're given a bunch of ways to identify them in this state, and it suddenly seems like they tend to be pretty far away from the term almost identical. We're also told in the PSA to stand our ground, attempt to intimidate, or even try to shoot the mimics if cornered. But the documentary tells us that weapons are practically useless, as they won't take the mimic down in time before it gets to you. It also says to lie in the fetal position if cornered to protect vital organs, which is absent in the PSA. Now, there are some things that are consistent between the two pieces of media. Both tell you to flee if a mimic gives chase, both tell you to contact the authorities and hide, and they both do seem to be trying to help you. And even if this PSA wasn't made with specific malicious intent, it's clear that the government is keeping information from people based on how Chris and Janice act 3 years before the PSA comes out. Considering we've seen the government literally censor media that came out before this PSA that contained similar information, it all just feels so disingenuous. Like, you really mean to tell me that nobody knew how mimics worked? They've already been around for 5 decades! But even still, everything that Chris and Janice do in the tape that we see just completely defies what we would expect from a society that has been dealing with this. They're out alone at night, they have no weapons or any kind of means to defend themselves, and they decided to walk through the woods to get to the scene of an alleged suicide, which many assumed was a murder anyways. But regardless of how it seems to us, Chris and Janice never mention a word about mimics throughout the entire tape. It was as if they didn't even know they existed. So far, throughout Season 1, every episode has been thematically related to one of the Vita Carnis in particular, and it has been going in the same order in which they were originally presented to us within the documentary. So the whole point of this episode is mimics, and that point's really important because I fully believe that this incident Chris was telling us about was a mimic attack. It may even have been the very same mimic. After all, it was the same area. And considering this tape is also confidential property of the police, it seems like these two suffered the same fate, their deaths purposefully misidentified. Okay, enough dancing around, it's time to address the elephant. The identity of the victim of the crime Chris was investigating is Vincent Barrar's father. The story we hear is of a young Vincent coming home to see his father completely eviscerated on the floor of their trailer home, and he was only 12 years old at the time. This is a really interesting revelation because it establishes a motive. The police covered up the death of his father and refused to reopen the case, so he eventually did his own digging, and that research radicalized him. Vincent has learned more than he was ever meant to learn, and now he's in too deep, and the government knows it. That's why he's a wanted man. I think we can safely conclude that Vincent Barrar is the person whose story that we're following, our main character. Next up is Species Anomaly Report. This one does not begin with a TV, but rather a computer. Carnis Species Log number 014. Abnormality Documentation, Harvester. Notable population density shift discovered between the dates of August 1st, 1989 and October 1st, 1989. Maps display the charted population of Harvester's location on a monthly basis. A distorted black and white photo of a family fades into frame, and we cut to see two of them traveling on a trail. While they're walking, we cut between disturbing audio and imagery. Briefly, we cut back to the population density maps to see the large advancements the Harvester population made. And then, we see the two walking once again. The Harvester tendrils creep forward. We return to see populations shift once more from September to October. They're congregating. Did you have a hard time listening to that? Because I had a hard time editing that. I didn't like editing that. Anyways, in case you didn't realize, this is the same as the event that was referenced in the news clipping back in the research documentary. It adds a bit of context that we don't receive in the video, notably the fact that the police refused to deal with the harvester despite it taking 2 lives, instead just putting up signs and telling the public to be more careful. Although it is crossed out, it also confirms that the mother tried to save her son, but failed to do so. Now, it is fairly easy to say that the reason why they encountered an unmarked harvester is shown to us in the video. They began to migrate extremely quickly between August and October of 1989, congregating around the shore of the Hudson Bay. And the title of the video is Species Anomaly Report, as in, this is clearly not normal behavior. They were heading towards the island where the monoliths stand. Although it is obvious the island is significant, for now, we can't really pinpoint a reason as to why that is. But we'll learn of its importance quite soon. Our next episode is titled Flavor Enhancer Commercial.
Flavor. The most crucial component to enjoying a good meal. The way food tastes is what makes eating so pleasurable. But what if you could savor every little detail you could possibly want? That is why we, at Nutrier Co., have made it so that you may enjoy every single bite you take.
This video showcases several commercials from Nutrier Co. advertising their flavor enhancer. We also see the release of a new product, the Flavor Enhancer Deluxe, showcased alongside a graph of their booming sales. As we progress through the commercials, though, the meals that are being showcased become simpler and simpler and simpler, with each commercial all the while ending with a strange tone.
Fill your kids with this essential part of every meal. Flavor.
Until eventually, it's just a slice of toast. Then it slowly devolves from a commercial with subliminal messaging into a downright brainwashing session.
Crucial to everyday eating.
You need the flavor enhancer to enjoy eating. You need the flavor enhancer.
Consume.
You need it.
You must need it.
You must.
Consume.
You must
Consume. Consume.
In the description, we can actually find another video, Uncovered Documents. It begins with a black screen, which then cuts between footage of an ant colony and visuals of the Flavor Enhancer Deluxe, which was previously advertised to us. Just like in Species Anomaly Report, we see a log being done on a computer, likely part of Vincent's research. In a similar vein, we see a newspaper clipping, which reads, Nutrier Scandal. Nutrier Co. is facing charges after numerous reports of sickness after consumption of their product, the Flavor Enhancer. The only statements made from the company so far are dismissing any issues, saying their product is safe to consume. We then zoom in on the Nutrier logo before watching as Vincent makes the connection, seeing it on the lapel of the World War II veteran and a censored politician. But it's not just the two of them, another dozen people all sitting in formal clothing. More important people. Then we see footage of a cordyceps fungus taking over the brain functions of an ant to infect another unsuspecting victim. Sound like anybody we know? We even see a before and after picture showcasing the degeneration of brain matter this causes. The reason why nothing was being done about the Vita Carnis is because thousands or maybe even millions of people are being actively brainwashed by the government and their frontal lobes are deteriorating because of this product. What the hell is the public supposed to do if their entire government is compromised and actively working against their best interest? But this conundrum is exactly what Vincent is aiming to solve. We get one more news clipping, this time teaching us about a new private organization called the Containment and Research Consult Association Society, or CARCAS. They've been experiencing backlash from government agencies related to violations of newly introduced policies. Sounds like someone we can trust. Someone Vincent can trust. He starts a new log, titled Message to Carcass, which leads us directly into our next episode. Message opens up with the date, December 30th, 1990, the farthest date we have so far. Suddenly, a documentary about monoliths begins to play.
In the distant horizon, the group of monoliths stand vacant. Although closed off to outsiders, there stands...
It goes on for a little while, but when it glitches, the tape's true colors begin to bleed through.
It is known to have hundreds of thousands of fibers that weave themselves deep underground.
Before long, we see what this tape is really for.
Unexplained phenomena, countless casualties, missing persons, fatalities, and yet no proper action, and notable silence about these affairs. People are afraid and confused. Why is nothing being done? Because they don't want us to know. We've been kept in the dark while those above us slither amidst the blind. They have slowly been numbing our minds to their schemes. But they've made one crucial error. Trails, crumbs, traces of information. I've collected these pieces and found their loose ends. This is why I've left this message to you. The documents included with this tape is all the information that I've gathered. Every continuity, every cover-up, every crumb that I can find. They all lead here. Something has been going on these few years. Something big. Something they don't want us to know about. Which is where you come in. I don't have the power to change things, but you do. Alongside the documents are plans. Plans for a meeting, one of great importance. You have the resources. With this information I have provided to you, I hope you can put a stop to all the scandals. I just hope it isn't too late.
We then cut back to the monolith documentary.
The monoliths are truly an astonishing sight to behold.
And then the TV turns off. What a cathartic way to reward all the people who paid attention to the little details leading up to this point. And as we suspected, everything really does lead back to the island. And although much of the episode was spent confirming suspicions we already had, there's also new information that's equally important. Of course, the big one was confirming that all of the inconsistencies in the narrative were intentional. Second, we learned that the people who made the National Living Meat Research documentary were just students, working on the project for fun without even being aware of the extra material that would have gotten them in trouble. Since it goes on to say some suspects were arrested, whereas outside sources are still at large, I'm willing to bet Vincent is either a former member of this group or the outside source that gave them the info to begin with. The third and final unique piece of information is the reveal that Vincent's father was a computer scientist, as seen in this article that details the incident in which he was murdered by a mimic. Earlier, I mentioned the special format that Vita Carnis uses to present its narrative, and if you've been paying attention, you'll notice that by process of elimination, we only have one left. Which brings us to our season finale. Facility Zero. We begin with a brief on the mission plan, a raid on an abandoned mall within the restricted zone, the perimeter of which is currently surrounded by harvesters and the monoliths. We see documents that finally clarify facts related to the singularities. That's right, singularities, plural. Several spheres composed of an unidentifiable material have been located in various locations on multiple continents. Each found thus far have been located via strange signatures being emitted by the orbs caught on various devices. As of the time this document is written, 4 singularities have been acquired. 3 more signatures have been located and are currently being investigated. Descriptions referred to on document number 001.1. Instructions are currently as follows. Remain on standby until all singularities have been obtained. Once all entities have been apprehended and contained at Facility 0, begin Stage 2 of the program. Refer to document number 009, New Trier, for basic briefing. From there, we get to see teams Alpha, Beta, and Gamma get into position to infiltrate, targeting a harvester in their path.
Pathway cleared. Give them the green light.
We now understand why the harvesters were all moving towards the island. They essentially act as a field full of bear traps surrounding the facility. Funnily enough, though, it seemed like a well-placed shot into the bulb is all that's required to take one down, really reframes the "authorities refuse to handle harvester" newspaper quote. They infiltrate the perimeter and make their way past a monolith who doesn't seem to be at all wise to the fact that they're even there.
Green.
Copy. Green light is a go. Begin phase 2 in advance.
After encircling the building, they begin phase 2 and infiltrate. We see footage of guards being taken out, and finally they arrive at a door.
Alpha team in position. We are experiencing mechanical interference. Should we resume? Copy. Phase 3 is still a go. Preparing for breach.
Breach.
Get down! Get down! Put your hands up! Put your hands up! Get down! Get down! Put down your weapon! Get down! Put down your weapon!
Well then, it seems like Carcass might have interrupted something a little important. Now, what it is that they were actually doing, I have no idea. But aside from that, I'd say the events that we just saw are pretty self-explanatory. Vincent sends a message to Carcass, Carcass raids the island and Facility 0, and you know the rest.
Now, normally you would assume that this is the end of Season 1. After all, that was the season finale, right? Well, actually, the video had a hidden link in it, and this link leads to another video titled 1 out of 3. But before we watch that, I need to get something off of my chest. Earlier I had a moment where I revealed that I was keeping some information from you. Then I revealed the brief single-frame images that were scattered throughout the research documentary, which proved to be very helpful in learning more about the hidden narrative within this story. But the truth is, there are more things that I've been keeping secret. Pieces of a fairy tale, bits of a legend hidden at the end of each episode. And these pieces, they tell a story. Once upon a time, there was a distant kingdom. The kingdom was ruled by a royal family, a king, a queen, and the prince. The royal family were magical scholars who wanted to obtain knowledge and expand their kingdom and heighten their mystical abilities. They traveled land and sea to discover new places and learn what the new lands hold. During their travels on one of their expeditions, a great storm struck. It was so powerful it swayed the boat the royal family rowed and pushed the prince out and into the sea. After being stranded at sea, the young prince was eventually cast to an island. Injured, the prince stumbled his way into a nearby cave. He then used what magic he could to put himself into a healing sleep. But the prince's sleep was long. He slept for what seemed like forever. As he slept, the land around him changed and grew. It was unrecognizable from when the prince first arrived. But the sleep still needed time to heal the prince, much more time. But it kept the prince safe while he rested, guarding him from the elements as the land changed. Outside the cave during a time of hardship lived the island critters. The critters were struggling during this hard time. There was barely any food to go around. They would go and gather whatever they could, but came back with less and less each day. Although one day, the critters found the cave while searching for food. They found the prince entranced in his healing sleep. The critters were awestruck and enchanted by the prince's magic. The critters argued amongst themselves. Who is this creature? Why are they here? Are they dangerous? A thought was brought up. What if this creature could use its magic to help them? It may grow food or heal sickness.
They continued to argue about the prince and his magic. In the end, the majority of the critters agreed that the prince was dangerous and should not be meddled with. Although, the other critters ignored the rest of their fellow kind. Instead, they secretly visited the slumbering visitor. They snuck what little food they had and carefully fed it to the prince, greatly hastening their recovery. One day, the prince awoke, suddenly. Thanks to the critter's assistance, the healing process had finished very quickly. The prince had fully recovered and was now fully awake and aware of their surroundings. Surprised by the sudden awakening, the critters ducked and hid from the prince's sight. One of the critters built up the courage to meet the now awake stranger. They crawled to the prince's side and extended their hand in friendship. The prince reached back and together, they had formed the bond that will change their fate. The critters led the prince outside of the cave up to the top of the hill the prince had laid buried under and showed them the forest. This is our home, full of wonder and beauty. Although the forest struggles to provide for all us critters, and we are facing disaster. Can you help us? The prince stood back, waved his arms, and before him grew a bright light. Mystical shapes and colors, lights and figures. The critters were struck with awe. Such sublime brilliance. The prince concluded his display. He vowed with the power he holds and with the help of his kingdom, he shall heal their home. The prince gathered what he could and then set sail onward. Once the prince returns home, they will come back to the island and return to the critters. One day, while the king, at long last, a new land in which the prince had returned, and now their kingdom Based on our current understanding, it's hard to actually pinpoint the total meaning of this storybook. We can certainly identify aspects that tie it to the wider narrative, though. The Vita Carnis origin appears to be directly correlated to the kingdom and its magical prince. The kingdom's banner is identical to the logo donned by the cult, and the prince's magic also resembles the glowing interior of the singularities. I'd say we can safely assume the island the critters live on is synonymous with the island in the Hudson Bay, which explains its significance to the cult and the presence of the monoliths. However, we still don't really understand exactly why the monoliths are there or why they appeared decades after the rest of the Vita Carnis. Assigning the prince an identity within the wider narrative is tricky, especially since the story points out that he left the island to return with reinforcements at a later date. A long time ago, I theorized that he was a singularity, back when we only had reason to believe there was one, but now I personally believe we've yet to see him at all. Assigning an identity to the critters is also really hard, but we have a bit more of a lead there. Leading theory is that they're humans, and I think this has a lot of merit. The critters are shown to be capable of complex discussion and reason, and live on an island that we know was developed by people at some point, later being abandoned and turned into the restricted zone. To explain their dire food situation, my original theory from years ago was that they were specifically humans living on the island during the Great Depression. It matches up with the timeline rather well. Since the Vita Carnis are shown to be edible, their original purpose very well could have been the prince offering an infinitely sustainable food source. Not only that, but the documentary goes out of its way to show how many of them are good for the environment, and the crawl is plentiful all over the planet. If we subscribe to this interpretation, it frames the Vita Carnis as a genuine gift to humanity. But since the prince is clearly just a child, he may have unintentionally unleashed the less desirable consequences that came upon the world, naively not even realizing the problem since he had already left. At least, that's the idea. All this would explain the cult's origins and their intense infatuation. Throughout history, humans have justified abnormal phenomena to themselves in numerous insane ways. Now imagine if 1930s humans encountered a dude with actual real magic powers. Suddenly, it seems a lot more reasonable to form a cult around all this. I will admit that I've definitely treaded into headcanon territory, but it's sort of necessary with how vague all this is. I know for a fact the prince was shown to foster a genuine bond with the critters and eagerly agrees to help fix their problem. And I'd like to believe that his role in the story is innocent, even though he may actually be an eldritch being beyond our comprehension. Unfortunately, it's unlikely that his parents will be as forgiving as him. Anyways, if you couldn't tell, this is what I meant by details being hard to pin down. Obviously, I offered what I at least believe to be a solid interpretation, but there's still so much left in the air that I think trying to dive any deeper now would probably be a waste of time. If we want to have a better chance at understanding the Vita Carnis, we'll just have to push forward. So, let's move on to Season 2.
But first, I want to take a little break. I know that we've had a lot to process so far. We're done with Season 1, and you can take this as an opportunity to pause the video, go get a snack, get something done, do whatever you need to do. I'll be here when you get back.
And for those of you that are regular viewers of the channel and might have been wondering, why has this guy been gone for like 4 months? I can't really give you a good answer, honestly. I was working on the Gemini video, I got burnt out on that. I also became a very avid coaster enthusiast about a year ago, so I've been doing a lot of traveling to parks, and I've been having a lot of fun with that. So yeah, I've just been less focused on the channel lately. But hopefully this video, which is the longest one I've ever done, and the Gemini video, which I still intend to do, which will also be long, will make up for that.
Thanks for getting this far into the video, by the way. I hope you have been enjoying Vita Carnis as much as I do. And yeah, that's all I had to say. Thanks so much. New Beginnings starts with scattered news clips detailing the aftermath of the raid on the cultist hideout.
Today something has happened within the restricted zone, where a large group of cultists have been apprehended. Several teams of military personnel have arrested some high-ranking cultists and have unmasked their identities to the public. Shockingly, several of these members are well-renowned politicians and high-ranking members of multiple governments across the globe.
Many documents have been released providing sufficient proof of the atrocities that were being committed. Some of these crimes include murder, kidnapping, torture, ritual sacrifice, and the list goes on.
The members are found guilty of deliberately providing false information to the public in an attempt to cause harm.
The new Trier Company has been found to have very significant ties with cultist activities and has been shut down. All new Trier products have been deemed hazardous for consumption.
Cultivation farms are facing pressure to shut down.
Public unrest grows as the new Trier cult case brings more crimes that were hidden away to light.
The people are outraged by how little was actually being done.
They demand that something be done to handle the Carnis species.
Riots appear in the streets as protests begin to turn.
Our leaders were plotting against us. Who do we trust? What happens now?
The chaos is abruptly stopped and interrupted by what seems to be a children's educational program.
Welcome to Magister's Wonder Show. I am the Magister, and get ready to explore all of the world's wonders. Today, we are learning about the circle of life.
We cut to a Carcass progress report from June 30th, 1991, simultaneously introducing us to the organization's head director and doctor, Marshall Trados. In the report, he goes on to describe their findings regarding the singularities, in total 7 of which were captured during the ritual raid. Much of the information is redundant and confirming properties we already knew they possessed, and he acknowledges this. However, there was another experiment they performed which yielded much more interesting results. First, a live cow was placed in the chamber with the singularity labeled V1. Nothing unusual was noted during this trial. However, when they repeated it with the deceased cow instead, the singularity seemed to consume the cow, which then yielded a massive amount of crawl in its wake, which went on to cover the room. After a bit of defeating,
Allow the crawl to grow out.
First, a young larva hatches from within its egg. It will roam around and find food to help it grow and grow. Once they are big enough, they transform into a pupa, and after some more time, they transform into an adult beetle. The adult beetle will go out into the world in search of...
to a different log from Dr. Rhodes' series from July 1st. This documents a set of trials regarding the crawl, with the purpose of confirming whether or not the samples grown from V1's chamber differ from normal crawl behavior. Trial 1 was a control, with no distinct abnormalities. Trial 2 involved extra nutrition, which, although faster paced, was normal. Even Trial 3, which added a radio to the mix, only noted that the crawl reached for the radio first before then growing at a normal pace. This trial is further confirmation of the Carnis tendency to have a strange connection to radio signals, possibly using it as a method of cross-communication. One thing that did differ with the crawl grown in the chamber was its faster rate at producing nodes.
From these, they managed to acquire 7 trimmings, 2 meat snakes, and even a mimic.
And then is ground into a fine mince and is now ready for the garden.
The next log from nearly 2 months later is performed by Dr. Fawn Benitro, the organization's trimming specialist. This experiment was done to explore group behavior of trimmings in colonies. When introducing new juveniles, no abnormalities were observed. They were welcomed normally, and the whole trial also allowed them to observe natural behavior in trimmings, learning how they communicate with each other through various squeaks, and noting how they readily display when they are upset, and perform a chewing motion when happy or curious. Next, they conducted a Pavlovian-style conditioning experiment to explore the depth of their communication. A single trimming is placed in a cage and receives treats upon a positive tone being played, and a spray of water when a negative tone was played. Eventually, the trimming was successfully conditioned to respond to the positive tone and anticipate the arrival of the treat. So, naturally, the same principle applied when the situation was reversed. Now, the whole point of the experiment was to see if the singular trimming would convey this information it learned on its own to the group. So it was placed back in a larger enclosure and the speaker was moved to where they could all hear. And sure enough, they all knew. But that's not all. The ones outside knew too.
There's many dangers out there in the world. There are many predators that would love to have beetles for a snack. And unfortunately, not all beetles make it. Yes, it is sad, but that's how the circle of life works. But look, one of the beetles has laid eggs. And once the beetle's eggs hatch, the beautiful cycle starts again. And life continues on.
To quickly go over the various revelations found in the episode, the conspiracy which dominated the narrative in Season 1 has now been totally exposed to the public, and now the cult, the government's involvement with the cult, and Neutrier have fallen from grace. From the chaos, Carcass has begun thoroughly researching the Vita Carnis during the months following, including the singularities he retrieved. The one seen in this episode is labeled V1, which implies the others are V2 through 7. There's two main points emphasized in the episode, the Circle of Life and the Carnis method of communication. Regarding the Circle of Life, this is highlighted in showcasing how the singularities will rapidly decompose and absorb the matter of dead organisms to then convert them into the Carnis. This may actually serve as a partial explanation as to where the Carnis originally came from. In fact, if we assume that to be the case, it answers a long-standing question from literally the first 2 minutes of the series. How could something so alien in nature be of Earth origin? It's simple. The Carnis are literally synthesized from dead organic matter on Earth. There seems to be a heavy emphasis on the dead part too. It doesn't seem to work at all on living things, which could also explain why some of the Carnis species have a tendency to be deadly. Things need to die in order for more of them to be made. With all this explanation, I'm sure the thematic reason for the Magister's inclusion seems a lot more obvious. At one point, he even talks about a beetle going out in the world to search for food, and immediately after, we cut back to the log that talks about Krull. This is why the Circle of Life is mentioned throughout the video. Circling back, we also learned a fair bit about communication in this episode. Previously, we were told that the Trimmings had a fascination with radios and television, and we also saw a news clipping of an incident where the Krull overtook a radio tower. Then, in this episode, we learned that not only are the Trimmings capable of layered interpersonal communication among colonies, it seems like they can even do it with other colonies they might not have direct contact with. We also had another instance of the Singularity's strange tendency to emit random frequencies. This, combined with the fact that the frequencies interfere with electronics, which we saw happen in Facility Zero, seems like concrete proof that the Carnis species can in fact communicate with each other using some kind of electromagnetic wave frequencies, and it appears to be a hive mind-like process. Now, before we move on, I want to point out that the description of the video actually has a secret for us. The title may seem like gibberish, but it's actually a Caesar cipher. It yields past regrets reaching out.
Although it was only 16 seconds long, there actually is a bit to get out of this video. When reversed, the audio suddenly matches the song that was used in the trailer for Season 2. What we're really interested in, though, is this mirror-flipped message that shows up about 9 seconds in. If we flip it, it reads, September 22nd, 1994. I think it's time that I take you up on that deal. Things are changing and not for the better. I will do what you ask. I'll start sending them over when I get the chance. B. As of now, we don't really have enough context to understand what the message or the video's title means. We don't know who this B individual is or who he's even talking to, but it's clearly important. 3 years from the point that we're seeing right now, something goes wrong. I'm gonna save any further discussion for later down the road when we know why it goes wrong. With that said, I suppose we should move on to the next episode the series has to offer. Revealed Progress.
Now only the most beautiful, only the most unique specimens will be moving forward.
There are lots of fossils hidden on the Earth, and plenty make their way into rivers and streams. You can look for them too.
This is from Dr. Asram Griffiths, and we've jumped about half a year forward to March 31st, 1992. This time around, they're experimenting with meat snakes. Specifically, it's called the Meat Snake Recreation Project. During the process, they restrain and begin to regularly feed a meat snake specimen, allowing it to grow in a controlled environment.
Over time, its movement slows, and eventually it just stops responding to outside stimuli entirely. From that point, the researchers have to force-feed the meat snake.
This is the point in which they take a skin sample to test its resistance, and sure enough, it withstood forces far above what typical meat snakes can handle.
From negative 40 degrees all the way up to 9,000. And they actually had to go out of their way to get something capable of dishing more heat to get that second result. As we might expect, the meat snake eventually disappeared from its holding spot.
In reality, it had performed mitosis, splitting into 2 smaller meat snakes, which halted the progress of the experiment, which is where the log ends.
You can make your own sieve at home. The mesh will catch large debris, allowing smaller things to pass through. But you can add more layers.
Lovely contestants so far, but there can only be one winner. And this year's winner is... Patty!
Is Dr. Farron Brown's mimic experiment from September 20th, 1992. They raised several juveniles in the facility, and in that state, they followed pretty standard hunting principles you'd expect from a carnivorous animal. But once they morph into their adult forms, they begin to refuse all food and starve, since their diets at that point are 100% composed of human flesh. They were able to study the behavior of some wild-caught adults for a bit longer since they already had food in their systems. They even managed to capture some humanoid variants. In the latter half of the log, Dr. Brones begins to discuss the behavior they witnessed in adults before they passed, mainly their tendency to fit in tight spaces and hide in furniture. Apparently, they didn't even know about this behavior until the late 70s. He even notes that since the PSA in 1986, the rules have just kept changing. But in reality, mimic behavior is random and unpredictable, meaning the government never really knew what was the right thing to do to begin with.
Plus, human testing is a no-go. Even though I volunteered myself, I feel so close to figuring it out. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. The next stages are even harder to... Wait, how long do these tapes have to be?
Look! This one would have fallen through our first sift. There are plenty of other fun things you can find as well.
Oh no. My sieve isn't working.
Looks like there's a hole in your mesh. Make sure your mesh isn't damaged, or else something might slip through.
On November 27th, 1992, an incident occurs involving V1 and the cleanup crew.
bad. It's bad. I'm bleeding.
What do I do?
I can't reach.
What do I do?
Help me down, please. Please.
We need medical assistance in test chamber 1. Stay calm. Help is on the way. Just try to stay
Damn
still.
it. Oh, God.
All right, we're here. We're going to help you. Lower the ladder slowly. This is going to hurt. Okay, hold still. Ready? Now!
What's happening? What's happening to him? Get him out of here now! Get him out!
What just happened? Well, it's hard to tell since we didn't get to see the person who got injured, but it seems like when the medical personnel freed the janitor's trapped and cut leg, V1 reacted in an extremely chaotic manner. As for why, well,
we could certainly suppose that it has something to do with the Singularity's ability to synthesize crawl, but it seemed like that only worked on dead things. Maybe a major injury provides an exception to that rule. It would certainly explain why they were so frantically trying to get him out of the room. Once again, the Magister has a place in this episode, and his discussion of things falling through the cracks of sieves seems to be a framework for a metaphorical warning directed at Carcass specifically.
In an effort to understand, define, and rationalize the Vita Carnis, the organization is playing with forces beyond their understanding. The meat snake they were experimenting on splits into two and literally slips through the cracks of its restraint. Really, though, I think this incident with V1 is the first true major consequence of their tampering with the Vita Carnis, and it certainly won't be the last.
And since the second episode has now established a pattern, I'd like to take a moment to talk about these intercut TV sections. Many of them show nature, but there's also a point in which a radio is shown. The inclusion of nature and radios have obvious thematic ties to the series in general, but these sections also give a place for the Magister's show to be, which adds even more thematic depth to every episode. But even disregarding that, it also gave us our first look at an elder trimming, which was nice. If I really wanted to, I could sit here for a long time and talk about how basically every cut in these TV sections has some kind of tie to the actual narrative. But instead, I'm gonna save any further discussion for further down the line when I discover a more practical reason for their inclusion within the episodes.
Just like with the previous video, revealed progress has its own secret to uncover. When deciphered, the title is Foolish Ambitions. This video features the interrogation of Simon Vanguard, the cult leader who was captured during the raid on Facility Zero. The interrogator asks him a lot of questions to no response, but we learn that Simon is a World War II veteran enlisting at the age of 18. We also learn that he's responsible for the cult's feeding of the supermassive meat snake. In fact, once the interrogator mentions what else they had down there, likely referring to whatever was in the redacted room, that's when he finally gives a reaction. When he finally speaks, it's only to label Carcass as fools. The interrogator questions why it would be foolish to try and learn more about the Vita Carnis, and further antagonizing him, he asks why they're so devoted to the creatures to the point of doing that to himself, and why the cult was so willing to blindly follow them.
What is so important that you blindly follow these entities? And why not? They say you have visions. These visions of yours, what do they say? What is it? What must you do?
I devote myself to the great truth, to stray from darkness and meet the light, for wonder and wisdom.
Hey, calm yourself. Hey, stop! I need security! I need security in here now!
After the footage cuts out, we're shown a picture of exactly what Simon Vanguard did to himself. Little information was learned about Simon and his motives. I think it's safe to say that this video supports the theory that I just mentioned. I mean, it's literally called Foolish Ambitions. I'm not sure how much more on the nose it can be. Even the cult leader is telling them that it's stupid to try and meddle. But this recording is from all the way back in 1991, so they clearly didn't listen. And eventually, that's going to become a problem. First contact picks up right where we left off.
All the entities are freaking out. The system can't handle all of this. Turn off the power. Sir, do it.
After shutting off the power, we see some tumult.
It is called the electromagnetic spectrum.
Then we return to find that V1 through 7 have all become stable once more. A member of the personnel attempts to enter the room to check on V1, but...
Entity seems much more active now. Sir, come in. Sir! I can't tell what you're saying, sir. Please respond. What? What the hell? I can't hear you clear enough.
Get out of there! Move out! No!
The waves reach the antennae and translate it into sound.
Now we finally get some clarification. The cleaner had been caught in between the steps of the ladder and snapped their femur. Besides unusual bruising and clotting, the cleaner is now stable. During inspection of test chamber 1, one of the guard's handheld transceivers began to experience interference. Sounds that came from the transceiver were chaotic and random, but there were some lines of coherent speech from both Dr. Trados and what seems to be the entity. Dr. Trados came up with an experiment to test a hypothesis. He had the device connected to the test chamber in an attempt to communicate to the entity.
Hello. Can you hear me? Can you understand what I am saying? Can you hear?
Yes.
Holy shit. What are you? Let's try something else.
The handheld device was switched to one of the devices used for trimming testing, an alarm clock radio. During this experiment, Dr. Trados attempts to learn about the singularities by asking them questions. At first, only vague answers are received, and they don't really get anywhere.
What are your connections to the Vita Carnis species?
But then, V1 asks him a question.
What?
These boxes, devices, they talk.
Are you talking about the radios?
Radio. Yes. Catches noise.
The doctor then proceeds to explain how radios work, transmitting electromagnetic waves and translating them into audible speech. V1 responds.
Brilliance. Much brilliance. Can we see more?
Do you want more radios?
No.
Even the color you see and the sounds you hear. Oh wait.
We abruptly transition somewhere else. Sounds like we're underwater.
Sir, is it really in our best interest to give these things what they want? We don't even know what they're looking for.
I understand your concern, but this is the biggest breakthrough we have ever gotten. This may even be the greatest breakthrough of all history. Representatives of the UN will be arriving in just a few days to see our progress. This is too important to stop now. We are on the verge of something massive. And if the representatives are impressed, we get the funding to see how far this can go. So, for now, you and the team go and get the orbs if they want. Keep making reports, but keep them quick. We need to learn as much as we can in this short time frame.
Yes, sir.
For all future tests with singularities, there will be a radio with a speaker present to allow communication for the entities as well as for personnel to ask questions. November 28, 1992. During test setup, we were able to capture singularities communicating to each other. We are working to decipher, but as of now, we are unable to understand what was said. November 29th, 1992. V1 was given several different electrical devices. We attempted to communicate more with it, but it didn't speak very often. Only single words out loud, not directed towards anyone. It was more interested with the devices than our questions. November 30th, 1992. Tests and questions were repeated with the other singularities. Each singularity acted differently than each other and gave differing answers to the questions. Although there were a few common factors that each shared. Each one has a fascination with electronic devices, especially radio. They are interested in entertainment like television, the radio, and music, especially classical music. December 1st, 1992. During testing with V1's interaction with a television, notable interference was detected with other electronics. V1 also spoke out loud several times.
They travel up to 28,000 kilometers per hour.
December 2nd, 1992. Last day before representatives arrive. After multiple tests with each singularity, we were able to find out each one's personality. V1, neutral in expressing itself, engages with personnel as minimally as possible, only shows interest with electronics and testing. V2, curious in nature, asks questions often, descriptive in its wording, eager to engage in testing. V3, more active, engages with personnel in a detached manner rather than one-on-one, engages minimally with personnel. V4, actively engages with personnel, curious about the personnel and what they are testing, prefers questioning us than conducting tests. V5, more expressive out loud than other singularities, although it speaks often only out loud to itself, has yet to communicate with personnel. V6, rarely engages out loud only with incoherent noise, doesn't acknowledge personnel, minimal engagement with testing. V7, least active singularity, has shown minimal engagement with all activities except electronics, only engages with other singularities. December 3rd, UN representatives arrive.
This is our main observation room, where we conduct much of the testing on the singularities. As you can see, we are still performing tests. We've learned much from the entities, and if we were to have your support, we can continue our work here. I am sure we can... What is that?
There's something tampering with the microphone and the monitors.
There has been much learned in our time together. I agree with Dr. Trados. As we continue, I am sure this union will benefit all. Symbiosis, we join together. Let us sow seeds and watch what grows. Divine purpose. Let us show you. Let us guide the way. Join us. Join us. Join us. Join us. Join us. Join us. Become one.
Okay, well, we learned a pretty large amount of information in that episode.
Starting from the beginning,
we confirmed that the cleaner survived the injury they sustained, but we still don't know why V1 freaked out like that.
This episode also spends a large amount of its runtime finally acknowledging in detail the Carnis' fascination with radio and television. In fact, it seems like anything that emits an electromagnetic signal intrigues the singularities, which is also what the Magister was talking about in this episode.
I think it's pretty obvious, but the singularities all speak in human speech that's just really, really distorted.
It is actually possible to pick out some pieces of the conversation the singularities had amongst each other. I really wasn't able to find much of it on my own, it was super difficult to make out, but with the help of some YouTube commenters, we find that their conversation mostly had something to do with our friend Vincent Perrar.
Which means the singularities know what he's doing. Now, earlier I promised a more concrete explanation for the TV intercut segments throughout Season 2.
Its presence wasn't exactly explainable before beyond thematic parallels. It seemed like it was just there to add a layer to the storytelling. However, if we assume that it was meant to represent all of the information V1 has been learning while watching television, suddenly it makes sense. After all, it's said that they enjoy classical music, and there's only one place where we've heard it, Magister's Wonders. How convenient is it then that it's been appearing so often during the TV segments?
And though the singularities have probably been learning a little too much about our world through the TV, I think they've also been listening to their surroundings the entire time as well. At least that's my explanation for the two parts of this video where we seem to be in a murky red water. I believe this is the series' way of placing us in the singularities' perspective. This also explains why V1 chose an inopportune moment to interrupt Dr. Trados' meeting with the UN representatives. It specifically went out of its way to make sure that they were there to hear what it had to say. And speaking more broadly about the singularities, we get some pretty affirming evidence regarding their purpose in this episode. When Dr. Trados is first talking with V1 on the radio, it says some things when asked about their connection to the Vita Carnis species. Although it is vague, phrases like made to life, made to pain, and then figures dancing, and then the words sleep, feel, feed, grow, all of these tell me a few things. One, that the singularities were made, possibly for the purpose of giving life, instructed to feed on matter and then grow the Vita Carnis. It's kind of sad that these vague phrases are probably the closest thing we've come so far to understanding why the singularities even exist, but that's just the way it is with Vita Carnis.
Another key detail we learned in this episode is that each of the 7 singularities are distinctly different entities with separate consciousness and personalities. Many speculate that each singularity commands one of the 7 species, and I do agree with this theory.
I mean, I can't really think of any other reason why there are 7 of them, but the number 7 also just comes up everywhere, so maybe it's not important.
Before I continue to analyze this particular entry, I do want to take a brief pause to instead talk about the episode's associated secret video, Surface of the Water. This video contains 2 flipped messages. The first of these is from August 30th, 1992, which is a few months before the incident involving the cleaner. It reads, "Notable events. Increase of Vita Carnis populations around the facility, minor earthquakes near Facility 0, more interference with electronics than usual when testing with singularities. Continue maintenance and keep watch for more events." The second message is much farther into the future, April 3rd, 1995. "Things are getting bad. More new hires are coming in to replace missing personnel. I worry when I will be next. We should have never continued our work here. They are neglecting even basic procedures now. They're building something. I will send you what I can." B. It's also probably worth noting that this video had underwater sounds just like those from First Contact, which explains the title. I believe this is all in reference to Carcass' research, once again bringing up the fact that it may have been wiser to leave the Vita Carnis alone after they thwarted the cult's plans. Human ego has brought them down after they tried to reach the sky, and now they have dove too deep, and they're drowning. As for the messages, it's interesting that one of them is so far in the future and even tells us about the completely backwards future state of Carcass. Personnel have begun to go missing and are nonchalantly replaced. Basic safety is ignored, and they've started building something. What that something is, we'll find out later. But it seems like these are the future consequences of Dr. Trados agreeing to work alongside the Singularities. One last thing that I want to talk about is what happens at the very end of First Contact. The footage is shut off as if being viewed as a tape on a TV, and we hear heavy breathing as the viewer panics following what they saw. The question is, who is this viewer? Well, we can draw an obvious connection to Vincent, making assumptions if we want. Or we can find out for certain. Let's move on to Terminal Rally. I have a request. One of the researchers I know has been missing their progress reports. I knew he would miss a few because he got approval for one of his field projects, but it has been 4 months. I know it isn't my place to ask you of this, but I am worried. I wouldn't ask you if I wasn't sure something was wrong. I found out where he was researching. Unfortunately, you know this area well. I will send what information I have. B. Then we get to continue the second half of the Mimic log, which we previously missed out on. In it, we learn that the humanoid mimics rely more on their limited speech abilities to corner prey, even speaking different languages, depending on where they're from. Then Dr. Brones tells us about the final stage of a mimic's life.
Anyways, and for the elders, we haven't found any. There are only a handful of sightings, fewer pictures, and only one clear one. The only info we have are from that one they killed years ago. Other than that, we are completely clueless.
After that log, we jump 2 years into the future to another log from October 2nd, 1994. Dr. Brones excitedly shares that he's finally been given permission to do the fieldwork he's always wanted to do. Unsurprisingly, nobody agreed to come with him.
Okay, everything is now finished up. I have some of the equipment at this main door. Motion sensors and the camera pointed right down here. It's not much, it's not pretty, but it will work for the time I've got. There are a few sensors and cameras in the other rooms as well. Basically some nanny cam set up to record when motion is detected. And down there is main base.
He shows off his temporary living situation in the basement bathroom, equipped with energy bars and water for 20 days of field work. A reinforced door, a panel that lights up when motion is detected, and a map of the house is also present. Most importantly, he has a sidearm to defend himself in the worst case scenario. Come day 2, Brones wakes up early in the morning and explains that he's keeping himself occupied with books and writing. Even though there's apparently no one else in the neighborhood, the mimic he knows is around hasn't made a move.
Just gotta be patient.
It isn't until that night at 2 in the morning that the mimic finally shows itself. Brones decides to try and listen in on the mimic and reaches for the radio, but as soon as he turns it on...
It stopped. It's been 2 hours. Nothing has triggered on the sensors. That means it hasn't moved. It probably hid. But I'm a bit suspicious. Why hasn't it moved at all? Did I scare it? The monitor doesn't make any sound. Something else?
2 more hours pass and still nothing.
Worried that he might have scared it off or that it may not have been a mimic at all, he decides to check out what happened.
Here we go. Gun, just in case.
It's an elder mimic. After he discovers he's accidentally lured an elder, he begins to panic, saying he has to abort the mission since he wasn't prepared for this scenario.
I think it realized it was being watched, so it moved so slowly that the sensors didn't pick up its movement. I think it spent the 4 hours crawling its way to my position, but I surely startled it. I may play this cautiously and leave.
By day 6, the light panel indicated that the mimic was last at the front of the house, but he knows that it was only pretending to leave. Knowing that it will likely stalk him for a while, he makes the sound decision to hunker down and wait for someone from HQ to come rescue him
at the end of the 20-day period.
But by day 9, he's lost the will to wait it out. After seeing no movement for 3 days, he steals his resolve and decides he just needs to make a run for it.
Okay, I've got everything I need. Oh, gun in hand. It's time to go. Fuck.
2 days pass. Nothing has happened.
Please stop. I can't. Please.
Day 16. Brones plans to make another escape attempt, but somehow the mimic knows and it tries to break in.
No.
The next day, he remarks how it was the perfect opportunity to run, but he just couldn't do it. And he knows for a fact the mimic isn't dead. Now it's just pissed. Day 20. Food is running low, but he still has faith.
They are coming for me. I know they are. Today's the day. Today. Day 22. They didn't come for me. I waited and waited. I don't know why, but they didn't. It's been 28 days. Food has run out. I know, now. I know. I haven't figured out. They sent me here to die. I have hid this video recorder so that if they do come, they won't find it. I'm ready. I know he knows. This is it. There you are.
February 17th, 1995. Footage was recovered from Farron's personal recorder. The camcorder was hidden under the sink next to Farron's body. None of his other equipment or supplies shown in the footage were present in the home. I'm sorry to say, things are much more dire than expected. Be careful. B. Terminal Rally is more than just another episode. It is the point of no return. Originally, Carcass specifically went out of their way to deny any request for human testing and fieldwork, even when he offered himself up personally as the test subject. Previously, we saw a message from our mysterious benefactor about events years in the future, warning Vincent of the fact that employees are being terminated and replaced, as well as basic safety protocols getting ignored. This message no longer refers to a future that we haven't seen. It's beginning to unfold before our very eyes. We see this highlighted within the video's secret entry, appropriately titled Divide and Conquer. In it, the visuals showcase spiders preying upon other spiders, with a striking similarity to the presentation which revealed to us the nature of the flavor enhancer all the way back in Season 1. There's also a strange abstract skull, which towards the end morphs to have the Carnis logo in its cranium. I believe all of this symbolizes the influence the singularities have gained over Dr. Trados, who is blinded by their grandeur and now follows their will, even if it calls for drastic measures. Carcass is cannibalizing themselves. Let's pivot our discussion over towards the Elder Mimic. It's actually extremely implied that not only is this the same mimic that killed Vincent's father, but the same that killed Christopher and Janice 3 years later. This is why Vincent's informant tells him it is an area he unfortunately knows well, and it's also why I can say for certain that this V is Vincent. If you need more proof, Brones says that nobody lives in the area where he's doing his field work, and Chris told us back in Season 1 that everyone moved away after Vincent's father was killed. Another thing that this episode reveals is that mimics are equally sensitive to radio frequencies as the rest of the Carnis, something that Dr. Brones unfortunately never got to discover during his mimic research. He didn't know it at the time, but his fate was sealed the moment he chose to use a radio in his setup. The actual term terminal rally, or terminal lucidity, as it is often referred to as, is a poorly understood phenomenon where individuals experience a brief, unexpected return of mental clarity moments before death. We saw this during the end of Dr. Brones' recordings, where he draws the conclusion that Carcass must have intentionally left him to die. If you're somehow still unconvinced, I want to point out how all of Brones' equipment was notably already gone by the time Vincent was able to find his remains. Although he successfully hid the camcorder, Carcass came in and confiscated everything else, leaving nothing behind but his rotting corpse with absolute disregard for his dignity. Unfortunately, the love and passion Dr. Farron Brones held for his work blinded him until he was already in too deep, and they left him to die. But this is just the beginning. In order to find out just how bad it'll get, we'll have to move on to our next episode, Dire Measures. July 3rd, 1995. I don't know how much time I have. I think they're beginning to realize what I'm doing. I've sent over one last package containing anything I thought looked important. If I don't contact you again, assume the worst. I know how hard it is to combat this alone again, but I don't think we have a choice. You figured it out before. You can do it again. Before it's too late. Good luck to you. B. We then see one of the things that was sent, a classified file from Carcass. Except we cut to a TV feed.
Sleeping is the body's way of taking a break, allowing it to grow and repair itself. Your brain goes through 4 cycles of sleep.
We get to see the contents of the file. It starts off with a harvester experiment dated January 20th, 1995. But I don't think this is the classified part, because we suddenly cut to a much older log. August 20th, 1991. This log discusses the immediate aftermath of the raid on Facility Zero, and we learn that Carcass found a living host of influence as well as a collection of powders during their sweep of the building. After some studying, they determined that one was a vial of host spores, one was a vial of flavor enhancer, and the other a darker colored powder with an unknown composition. Afterwards, they detained the host at the Carcass facility and aimed to study it and the 3 powders to further their understanding. 2 months later, we get another log detailing a theoretical human trial with the host, which is probably why the file is classified. After intentionally subjecting the individual to the spores, they get decontaminated, quarantined, and their behavior is monitored. After symptoms subside, they are required to give a vocal and written report of the effects they felt while influenced.
Poisonous sting cells have hollow barbs to stun and eventually kill prey.
In the first stage, your body begins to relax and your brain activity begins to slow.
We return to the harvester log. The bulb is placed in a new cell, and after 5 months, it reaches maturity and can begin the next stage of testing. During this stage, they intend to extract harvester venom to study its properties. However, this is obviously a very dangerous task, so they had to come up with a safe procedure for doing so. Their first idea is to lower a silicone sponge-shaped person to be pierced and absorb the venom, but as it turns out, a harvester's attack is too violent for this strategy to have any meaningful effectiveness. Back to the past, we see our host experiment test subject, Ledodolus, who volunteered for the position. As expected, he displays irritation upon inhaling the spores, and the host actually tries to attack him, which damages the barrier. Following this, Leto is quarantined for 36 hours. He spends the entire time standing idly by the door in a mindless state. After his symptoms subside, we get his first audio report.
I feel tired, and I have aches in my legs and arms. I'm also quite nauseous. Not dizzy, but foggy, if that makes sense. I don't feel too bad overall. The worst I feel is very hungry and thirsty.
His written report reads, "My vision was darkened and blurred, like wearing glasses of the wrong prescription. Sounds were muffled. I felt a heaviness in my mind. It took extra effort just to do the actions I thought of. Then I was filled with a blind need to leave my room. I couldn't explain why, like forgetting why you walked into a room, but instead it's forgetting why you're leaving one. My ears rang the entire time."
In the second stage, your heart rate and breathing slow, and your body temperature lowers.
Given no safer option, the lab crew resorted to sedating the harvester and manually siphoning venoms from its spines. Apparently, this procedure works quite well. They successfully extract both venom types and discover that the paralysis venom is present in much higher quantities than the anticoagulant. Second exposure to the spores, the host is notably less aggressive for an unknown reason. In this instance, Leto is significantly more distressed about being unable to leave his containment, trying to forcefully open the door, but still being in a mindless state.
I'm much more, I'm exhausted now. My joints feel tight, and my muscles as well. There's a slight tremor in my fingers. I'm very disoriented, and my head is pounding. I'm also seeing silhouettes, and my vision is, I don't know, like if you looked at a light for too long and it gets burned into your vision. I'm getting better though. I think I should be fine to continue.
The written report reads, "My eyes hurt. Everything was too out of focus. It was dark. I saw flashes of light just out of sight. The ringing was so loud. I thought I heard whispers. I couldn't tell. The ringing drowned out most noise. I can't remember anything I did after being fucked up again. Just trying to get out. I needed to get out."
In the third stage, your body should now be almost fully relaxed.
After the first successful venom extraction, we see that they have been producing vials of the stuff en masse. And now we're on exposure 3. The host has mellowed out. Now he's oddly curious about Leto, which notably seems pretty distressed when the spores are released. On the third quarantine, Leto starts banging his head on the door, so he has to be detained and tied to the bed to prevent further harm. After the effects wear off, he insists that he's willing to continue, for some reason.
It feels numb, like pressure. It's not bad. It doesn't hurt. I don't think so, at least. I remember something. I can't pin it though. Like remembering a dream. It was bright. It was nice. I felt important.
"I see figures dance in the dark. I want to catch them. Why were they there? What did they want to say to me? I couldn't hear their whispers. So much ringing. I needed to hear what they said. Why did they need me? Why was I called?"
And finally, in stage 4, brain activity begins to pick up again, and your eyes begin to rapidly move. This stage is called rapid eye movement sleep, or REM sleep. This stage also has the most likely chance you will dream.
On July 25th, the researchers on the harvester experiment confirmed that harvester tendrils do not trigger in the presence of trimmings. It can be assumed all of the Vita Carnis share this truce with each other, but Carcass wants to do further testing to confirm. Exposure 4. The spores emitted from the host are now the distinct red hue, matching the mysterious third vial that was retrieved. Leto is tied to his bed from the get-go this time, and he tries relentlessly to free himself during the 36-hour period. Audio report.
I see it. It is dark, but a light so beautiful. I devote myself to the great truth, to stray from darkness and meet the light, for wonder and wisdom. I serve my Lord. I serve my Lord. I serve my Lord. I serve my...
Given the clear mental strain on the subject, testing has been halted indefinitely.
But what are dreams?
Hey, why am I tied up? What's going on? Hey!
Sit still, Bruce. It's all right.
Dr. Trados?
We're just going to ask a few questions. The restraints are just a precaution.
What?
Relax. So, Bruce Phoenix, you are the manager in our files department, is that correct?
Yes. I, organize documents, process reports, mainly with our experimentation unit.
We noticed that there has been some tampering with some particular documents. Well, you are the head of that department, so we thought you would know something. Are you sure you don't know anything?
I'm sure.
You know, loyalty is an important part of how we work here. We handle some important things, classified things, so when we find out that someone has been smuggling documents behind our back, that is awfully concerning. Especially when that person, I don't know, is lying right to my face.
I can explain! I was just...
Stop! I don't need to know what you were doing with them, but I do need to know one thing. Who are you sending them to?
No one!
Who are you sending them to?
Please, sir, listen! I was just organizing them and I had to move them!
Who are you in contact with?
Marshal, please! I'm not lying!
We are past that, Bruce. Why do you think this was acceptable? What you are doing threatens national security. You are actively threatening the progress of the human species.
No! I'm trying to save the human species. What we are doing here is wrong! It's those things! They have brainwashed you! They are messing with your judgment. Safety protocols, basic upkeep, reckless experiments. This isn't progress! This is madness! You're becoming like those monsters who worship them! Please, Marshal. We need to stop.
I will ask one last time. Who are you contacting?
Never. I'm done. I won't be a part of this. I'm done.
Cut the cameras.
Have you watched some of the tapes of the experiments we do? It's interesting, some of the things in there. Did you know in harvesters that both of the venoms they inject are lethal? The neurotoxin doesn't just block the nerve signals, it directly attacks each nerve, causing sudden paralysis in muscles, moving deeper into your vitals. But for each nerve that dies, you feel every single thing. But all you can do is sit in silence as your nerves burn away until your heart stops beating, your lungs stop breathing, and your brain shuts down. Fortunately, usually the other venom causes you to bleed out first. Sir, what are you doing? Fortunate indeed. Sir, please. No, please don't! Don't! Please don't! No! I'm sorry, Marshal.
we see the final missing written report. Based on all the details we just saw, it should be very easy to conclude that Bruce Phoenix is the bee that Vincent has been in contact with. Bruce suspected he'd be caught soon. He knew what he was doing was risky, but even when confronted, he refused to give up Vincent's identity. In regards to Carnis information, we learned that hosts for some reason have a mysterious red version of their spores that the cult had in their possession. We also see this occur organically during Leto's 4th exposure, but we still don't know why this happened or how it's different from the normal spores. If we pay attention strictly to what happened to Leto, he exhibited behavior in line with Simon Vanguard's devotion after inhaling the red spores, even quoting him directly when he says, "I serve my lord." One more small detail that we seemingly confirmed in this episode is that the Vita Carnis refused to harm each other, seeing as the trimming was incapable of activating the harvester. I find this to be particularly intriguing because we know that even inanimate objects like bags or clothing can trigger the spines. You really wouldn't expect the harvesters to be particularly intelligent because they can't seem to tell the difference in what they catch. Moving on, this time around Magister discusses sleep and dreams. We can draw obvious parallels to the Prince healing sleep, of course, especially since at first he talks about how sleep is the body's way to repair itself. However, something particularly strange happens towards the end when Magister is asked by the audience what dreams are. His expression and demeanor immediately shift to that of utter confusion. What about the question stumbled him to such a degree? Honestly, I don't know. There is a possible double meaning with the message of sleep in this episode as well, but in order to understand the other half, we'll first have to watch the accompanying secret video. What you just watched is titled Futile Attempts to Overcome. The imagery shown throughout this depicts both the death of Vincent's father and the harvester incident that killed the mother and her son. The audio, when reversed, is extremely difficult to make out. However, there are bits that are audible. So let's think about what these words actually mean. I believe this video is Vincent's nightmare, an abstract representation of his survivor's guilt. That's why I said Magister's mention of sleep and dreams had a double meaning. And the thing is, Vincent hasn't just lost his father. This video is clearly trying to show us that the mother and son from the harvester incident were also part of Vincent's family. He's the only one left. I didn't mention this previously because Species Anomaly Report attempts to frame the incident in such a way that the timeline doesn't add up. The video shows harvester migration patterns from 1989, which makes you think the incident surely happened because of these migrations, right? But that isn't necessarily true. In fact, there's nothing that explicitly tells us this. It's an assumption that many of us, including me, made entirely on our own simply due to the way that it's framed. It's possible that the entire reason he was researching the harvester migration to begin with is because he wanted to try and understand what happened to his mother and brother, and in the process of doing so, he noticed the pattern that he then noted in his message to Carcass. The secret video's title also comes with several deep meanings. For one, it refers to Carcass, who originally went in with the goal of studying the Vita Carnis after opposing the cult just to follow their exact path. A futile attempt to overcome. And of course, it refers to Vincent in two ways. First, framing his survivor's guilt as something he can't triumph over. Finally, it laughs in the face of the insane effort that he's gone through to stop the Vita Carnis, with his guilt as his driving motivation being entirely meaningless. Nothing but a futile attempt to overcome. And within the season finale, we'll see just how futile any attempt really is. Necrotic Wound opens the same way the season began.
more regions along the west coast have become inaccessible.
As protests cool off, production has returned back to its original profits.
Nationwide air quality alerts as smoke begins to spread.
Multiple sightings of migration have been spotted.
If you or a loved one has consumed nuclear brand rod at 70 point, please come.
Vincent begins a new log documenting the last of Bruce's collection. First, we see a progress summary sheet from June 20th, 1995. Regarding the crawl, some abnormal DNA samples have been identified, and notably this is the only classified item on the entire list. Much of the rest of it confirms stuff we already know, and they confirm two things about the Vita Carnis as a whole. Firstly, they can swim, but second, apparently, they're actually not a connected hive mind. After this, we get an old audio log.
I was tasked with leading the Alpha team into Facility Zero and capturing multiple items of interest. The mission was a success. All items accounted for, only hostile casualties. Once the area and the prisoners were secured, we were extracted. But something wasn't right. The mission went smoothly. Too smooth. There were powerful people in there. Some seriously important people, but there were less than a dozen armed guards in the entire facility. It was all so convenient. Why was it so easy?
After, we see another summarized report from the same day as before, this time regarding facility upkeep and maintenance. There's unusual seismic activity around Carcass in Facility Zero, which was noted previously. Wild Carnis species are gathering around Carcass as well. The singularities have also suggested a facility expansion for Experimentation and Assembly Stage 2. At the bottom, we see that recommended maintenance is also being ignored. However, the most interesting thing here is that second to last piece of information. It seems like the singularities alert Dr. Trados of performance decline in specific faculty members and then proceed to suggest terminations.
And we saw this in action with Bruce and Brones.
After this, we see schematics for a strange satellite device. Its construction involves the crawl as well as a broadcast emitter. In the corner, the speed of standard radio waves is shown. 299,792 kilometers per second, the speed of light. However, this Weaver satellite is somehow capable of sending out signals far exceeding the speed of light, which is an insane implication to say the least. The singularities clearly want to send a message, and they want to send it far and fast. In the next slide, a breakdown of something called the crawl cable intake adapter is shown, further clarifying the use of crawl within the machinery. To me, the entire point of showing us this is to tell us why the narrative has been so obsessed with pointing out radio and electromagnetism, not just in the season, but throughout the entire series. This affinity with electromagnetism was passed on to the crawl, through which all of the other Vita Carnis came from. After this, another slide is shown. This time, a gateway in the shape of the Carnis logo. In its center, a keystone ignition is labeled, which we can then see in greater detail in the very next slide. Then, we see something insane. A letter. Dear Dr. Marshall Trados, it has come to our attention that you have managed to achieve something great. We understand that our previous interactions have not been ideal. We are willing to move past our conflicting past and move forward in light of this new achievement. And what an achievement it is, indeed. Your facility managed to do what we have spent the entirety of our assembly's lifetime dedicated to in a matter of 2 years. We have underestimated you yet again. We understand that you have had the honor of communicating to the entities themselves. How blessed you are to be in the presence of such greatness. You have seen it too, haven't you? They have shown you their divine will, the great plan. We know you are assisting them in the construction of their tools, and we would be honored to give our full, complete support and fidelity, for we both now follow the will of the Master. We are happy to once again work towards this common goal together. For wonder and wisdom, we serve our Lord. Vincent has only one goal now. He titles the new log, Destroy Carcass. After this, we see a list of terminated employees, which includes 2 people we know quite well. The recommended terminations also exclusively includes the names of people we've heard before, and their recommended replacements, all likely cult members. New Trier employees, Carnis cultivators, and 2 ambiguous wildcards. A file manager, sure, but also a suspiciously familiar data engineer by the name of Christopher Ainsley. On a log dated August 22nd, 1995, we see a few new points regarding the current state of Carcass. Signs of a gas leak are noted, new human trial volunteers arrive, radio contact with Facility 0 is out of commission with a clear intent to restore it, and finally, a request to bring in the new data engineer. After this, we cut to footage taken from security cameras. 2 employees are seen talking, with one training the other on software. A woman comes to inform the trainer that they've had progress restoring the radio connection to Facility 0, so he leaves and tells the new hire to stay put. But that doesn't happen. Christopher makes his way to the storage room, walks over to the corner and does something, and then we see him leave the room as if nothing happened. But in reality, he set the room on fire. This isn't just some random data engineer, this is Vincent Barrar. The fire alarms begin to blare and Vincent walks opposite to those trying to leave the building. We see that the server room is also on fire, and then cut to Observation Room 1, and briefly see Vincent through the flashes of light. However, the door shuts behind him.
Your effort is paid. We see you. We know you.
You had no choice.
Didn't you? But I see beyond. I see potential. I look past what is. And look for what can be. We watch you grow and rise. How can I not trust you? Why overlook such promise? And so far, that's all we can see. Just empty promise. The species fails to see. Fails. Craves to be guided. And rightly follows. But you, Lullaby, you have shown us otherwise. You had no chance. But also no choice. Didn't you? You did what had to be done. Taking action. I respect that greatly. Be proud of yourself. We stand out on this side, sharing this curse. I encourage you. But still, you had no chance. We see you. We know you.
We knew you would try.
We counted on it. Your
Blinded by our
grandeur. We shall take it from here. Detach from them. They have used up their worth.
not like you.
Go now. Your passion has spared you. Continue to feed us.
We take our leave.
Much to be done. Still, much action to do.
As the singularities overload the grid, the Vita Carnis begin to evaporate, spontaneously turning into a haze and rising up into the air. This mass then accumulates, seeping through the floor and joining with the singularities, as the ground begins to rumble. Outside the building, smoke can be seen and a local news anchor reports on the incident from a helicopter above. Then we see the glowing singularities rise into the air, assuming formation, and they begin to spin rapidly before forming a single glowing circle. The wild Vita Carnis from the area begin to gather around them and the ground shakes further. The two elder meat snakes get ripped from the earth below, up into this vacuum, and we cut to a separate helicopter which shows the monoliths having not only left their posts on the island, but actively crossing the sea towards the mainland in an attack on Titan-style apocalypse scenario. Returning to our view from Carcass, a giant winged creature emerges from the smoke, I believe to be the result of the 7 singularities merging with the Carnis that surrounded them. I would bet that the reason why the cult made the supermassive meat snake is because they needed mass that would be extremely resilient to create this unstoppable beast. An EAS warning is sent out as the monoliths begin tearing through human populations, completely unimpeded by anything that gets in their way. The winged creature flies over a ground observer, and later we see the monoliths marching toward it. It's inevitable now that they will meet, but what could possibly happen happened then.
Thanks for watching. Tune in next time to explore more of the world's wonders.
Okay, this is probably the part where you expect me to tell you what just happened. But guess what? I have no idea what just happened. I don't know why the Singularity spared Vincent. I don't know why they turned into a giant butterfly. I don't know why the monoliths left the island and ran into the giant butterfly. And I certainly don't have any idea what the hell that thing is. This is very similar to how I felt when Season 1 ended. Back then, we didn't have any precedence for there being 7 singularities, which blew my old theories regarding the prince being the singularity completely out of the water because there was more than one of them. We don't know if the new entity that we saw is the prince, the king, or none of the above, but I would wager that there's a high likelihood that it's one of the royals. But you know, none of this is really what's having me scratch my head. What confuses me the most is these strange devices that the singularities told Carcass to build for them. The cult letter describes them as their tools, and one of them seems to be for faster than light communication, the other is literally labeled a gateway, so it's probably meant for some kind of point A to point B travel, and their potential uses are mostly straightforward, even if we lack clarity. But what I don't understand is how their existence and the events of the rest of the episode are connected to the singularity's end goal. In regards to the speech delivered to Vincent, there's a lot of cool intricacies in the way that the dialogue is written that we can unpack. When they mention humanity, associated imagery of some of the greatest technological achievements we've made, such as satellites, rocket ships, and biological engineering, are shown. They refer to this as promise, but then they frame humanity as only possessing empty promise. They show pictures of garbage, mass destruction, and nuclear weapons and war. They then bash humanity as craving to be guided and blindly following, even if it isn't in their best interest, which is a massive theme of Season 2. The singularities claim Vincent gave them a reason to detach from using humanity to further their interests, a conclusion that I can't really understand how they came to as of now. Though it may have something to do with the singularities claiming that they were counting on Vincent taking action, almost as if it was part of their plan to begin with. The way the singularities talk down on humanity and clearly view them as lesser during this whole spiel makes me reconsider that the critters in the storybook may not have been humans after all. The documentary spends a lot of time going out of its way to focus on just how beneficial the Vita Carnis are for the global ecosystem. But the thing is, they disproportionately benefit everything else, whereas we get the guy literally designed to hunt and kill us. The Vita Carnis are not freak accidents of evolution, they have an intelligent designer. And although many uses for the Vita Carnis in general were found, I believe that this is just human ingenuity and it's pure coincidence. It's possible that maybe the humans on the island were considered special and the prince only cared about that particular group, but it's also entirely possible that the forest critters were instead exactly as they are labeled, local creatures and wildlife native to Earth. You could easily reframe their worries regarding the forest's ability to provide as a metaphor for human exploitation, causing nature as a whole to struggle and species to become endangered. When I first theorized about the storybook years ago, this was my alternative and honestly more preferred line of thinking, and I'm starting to believe that it may still be accurate, but to tell you the truth, we just don't know. Now, a question. Why would the singularities spare Vincent if they have always been fully aware of him and what he was trying to accomplish? Of course, they respected his passion and drive, but they are so overwhelmingly confident that he has and will never have any means of stopping them that I believe that's why they let him live, giving him an escape route before everything went down. Another interesting aspect of the speech they gave is that the singularities, despite clearly having individual personalities, were finishing each other's sentences, even occasionally referring to themselves as a singular I as opposed to we, implying a level of shared consciousness of some kind. This is funny because one of the documents towards the beginning of the episode seems to confirm that the Vita Carnis lack the hive mind characteristic, which directly conflicts with a lot of the information we've been given. At the very end of the video, Magister concludes his program, likely marking the end of his appearances due to his nature as a plot device for the season. At least one of these loose ends is tied in a neat bow. To my knowledge, there isn't a secret video present on the final episode of Season 2. Until Season 3 comes out to complete the trilogy, we'll have to mull over the content we currently have at our disposal. But of course, the video isn't done quite yet. I understand that this has been quite the venture. You might have gotten a little lost somewhere along the way, or you might not understand the full picture. To make sure we're all on the same page, I'm going to fulfill my promise from the beginning of the video, and I'm going to try my absolute best to compile a comprehensive timeline of events. Every major plot detail listed in chronological order. Let's do this. Our story begins, well, we don't really know when it begins, but we do know for certain where. And that place is a distant, faraway kingdom, ruled by a royal family of magical scholars. Traveling land and sea, they hoped to expand their kingdom's reach and heighten their mystical abilities further. If we stop to consider a few details, I think there's a lot of evidence that points to the royal family being an intelligent alien race. The specific use of wording such as distant kingdom in the presence of magical powers is one thing. The travel of land and sea could also easily be a metaphor for intergalactic travel, and the desire to expand could imply that they had a tendency to assimilate other planets into an empire. I would also struggle to justify the existence of a satellite built to speed up radio signals past the speed of light if it wasn't meant to communicate with someone extremely distant from Earth, which I honestly believe is probably the strongest piece of evidence for the theory. Moving on, during a routine expedition, the royal family encounters a great storm which forces the prince overboard. Regardless of whether or not the prince is alien or human, the storm resulted in him washing up on the shore of a certain island that never was, exclusive to this version of Earth, the island in the Hudson Bay. Injured, the prince puts himself into a deep healing sleep in order to recover, and much time passes as the world changes around him. That being said, we don't exactly know what something as nondescript as much time means in quantifiable terms. It is worth pointing out, though, that the storybook immediately proceeds to describe his surroundings as unrecognizable from when he first arrived. If we want to go by exactly what we have evidence for, the storybook page depicts the changing of the seasons, which implies a minimum of 1 year. But honestly, at this point, I'm probably reading way too far into it. This easily could have been a lot more than a year, so for now, we're gonna take much time with a grain of salt. It's also difficult to pin down exactly when the prince first arrives. We know that the Vita Carnis didn't begin to appear until around 1931, which makes the prior year the earliest he could have arrived. But I'd like to believe for dramatic effect that the prince arrived much, much earlier than that, perhaps even predating documented history. Of course, we know that at some point the forest critters would find the prince and nurse him back to health, feeding him despite being low on food themselves. Due to their help, the prince would wake from his healing sleep much earlier than he was meant to. He showcases his magic to the critters and vows to help them with the full might of his kingdom. From there, he leaves on a boat, flying the banner that we've come to know quite well. This black circle and red triangle represents the Vita Carnis as a whole throughout the series. Once again, though, we arrive at another point of contention, and it has to do with whether or not everything we see in the storybook has actually happened yet. This stems from the fact that we still don't really know who the prince is. At this point, our strongest pieces of evidence regarding the connection between the storybook royals and the current narrative are the satellite, the gateway, and the new guy who shows up in the season 2 finale. But I have no idea how to piece it all together, and I honestly don't think we should be expected to be able to yet, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. Regardless of the prince's identity and activity, we know the Vita Carnis began to appear in the 1930s and their population spiked 3 separate times. The first spike is due to their initial introduction, but then it happens again towards the end of World War II. By then, the Carnis had already established itself as a part of human life. In the decade or so since their arrival, a cult had already formed, led by a war veteran by the name of Simon Vanguard. Using countless corpses left behind from the war, the cult grew a supermassive meat snake, creating one of the first Elder variants. In 1947, this meat snake performs mitosis and proceeds to disappear underground for decades. Just over 20 years later, in 1968, our central protagonist, Vincent Barrar, is born in Canmore, Alberta. Fast forwarding to 1972, the population of the Carnis explodes for the 3rd time, roughly coinciding with the appearance of the monoliths on the island. The Canadian military attempts an organized attack on them, likely due to there having been a human population on the island. Honestly, even now, it's difficult to say exactly what purpose the monoliths fulfill. For most of the series, they served as protectors of Facility Zero, and nothing really more than that as far as we know. Obviously, they did something at the end of Season 2, but we don't really know what the hell that was for. I honestly would not be surprised if the military attack on them was entirely orchestrated to give the government a reason to bar the public from where they intended to later house the singularities. However, if that is not the case, then it would have to be rather soon after this that the cult infiltrates higher positions of power within society and basically starts controlling the government. And around this time, an incident involving a harvester occurs on a family hiking trip, killing the younger of the two sons and the mother. When we first learn of this, we don't necessarily know quite yet, but this is actually Vincent's mother and younger brother. At this point, even local police forces have begun to be affected by government corruption, as they are mentioned to downright refuse to dispatch the harvester after 2 people are killed by it. Tragically, only a few years later, the father of this family is killed by a mimic in 1980. The local police frame it as a suicide despite eyewitness reports of a gruesome scene defying that assumption. Vincent Barrar, just 12 years old at the time, has now lost his entire family to the Vita Carnis. Later on, a group of students creates a group project titled National Living Meat Research. In an attempt to publish their findings on the Vita Carnis, the government silences them, even issuing arrests despite their stating none of them knew any of the included content was sensitive information. A $500,000 fine is assigned to anyone possessing the tape, and information is now blatantly being kept from the public. Among these students was likely Vincent himself, who would have been a teenager or young adult at the time. Having reason to investigate due to his experiences, he found himself digging deep into conspiracy. The Singularities speech seems to confirm this connection, but not in any great detail. Because his name is associated with the project, Vincent becomes a wanted man and has to live life from the shadows going forward. And this is when he discovers for the first time just how little the way the government treats the Vita Carnis makes sense. In 1983, Christopher and Janice fall victim to the same mimic that killed Vincent's father. Their careless behavior and lack of education regarding mimics is what causes the incident. The amount of missing persons is no longer dismissible as simple disappearances, and the government releases a mimic defense instructional tape in 1986. This tape, while mostly true, contains some facts that directly contradict information in the research documentary, such as its recommendations on how to use weapons. In fact, lots of information seen throughout the first season contradicts itself at multiple points. Vincent notices this as he has begun to do extensive research regarding not just the Vita Carnis, but the forces at play, clearly trying to hide their true nature. With the information he learns, he begins writing digital logs to document his findings in the late 80s. This can be seen in Species Anomaly report, where he writes Carnis species log number 014 and notices the dramatic shift in the harvester population towards the end of 1989. In June of 1990, Nutrier Co. is founded by the cult, and they manufacture a mind control agent in the form of the Flavour enhancer, reverse engineered from host spores. It works incredibly well and becomes popular amongst the public. This initiative encourages the people to begin consuming crawl, even spawning some cooking programs on TV. That same year, Nutrier Co. releases the Flavour Enhancer Deluxe, and through a series of subliminal messaging advertisements, they seem to successfully brainwash a pretty large portion of the general population. Although Vincent notices the problem with the Flavour Enhancer rather quickly, he isn't the only one to do so. Vincent manages to find several sources standing in opposition to its massive presence, including a private organization known as the Containment and Research Consult Association Society, or CARCAS. Realizing that he may have himself a powerful ally, Vincent creates a comprehensive package, including every single discovery he's made throughout his years of thorough investigation, and discreetly sends it to them, dated December 30th, 1990. We don't know who within Carcass ends up receiving this information, but they do act upon it, and pretty much immediately. In less than a week, they organize a military front to raid the abandoned mall labeled Facility Zero. This mission goes extremely well, and many high-ranking members of society are exposed to the public as members of the cult. But more importantly, the 7 singularities are all seized and brought to Carcass HQ. Public outrage brews after the cult's scandal is exposed, seen in the news at the beginning of Season 2. On January 5th, the cult's leader is interrogated for information, but very little in the realm of useful info can be extracted from him. A few months later, in March, the Alpha Team leader admits that it was almost too easy. Despite how important the people there were only around a dozen armed guards, and it only took killing one harvester in basic tactics to avoid the monolith. Something about it just didn't seem quite right. And we know now this is due to the fact that the cult likely planned the whole thing from the beginning. 6 months after the raid, Carcass begins to delve deep into researching Vita Carnis and their properties, headed by Dr. Marshall Trados, the leader of the organization. They make several interesting discoveries, the first major one being the implication that all of the Carnis originate from organic matter by virtue of the singularities. They simultaneously discover that electromagnetic waves, more specifically radio, plays a huge role in the communication of the singularities and the Vita Carnis in general. The research continues steadily through 1991 and through most of 1992. In late November of that year, a cleaner breaks his femur on the job, inexplicably causing a chaotic overload where V1 freaks out and also causes the overload of the rest of the singularities, which shorts the entire building grid. After a guard's receiver experiences abnormal interference while checking on the room V1 is in, Dr. Trados successfully hypothesizes that he can communicate with the singularities directly by using radios. Unfortunately, Dr. Trados has become slightly obsessed with the prospect of researching the Vita Carnis and decides that pleasing the UN investors to get funding to continue his research is more important than stopping to wonder if the singularity's end goal even has humanity in mind. On December 1st, V1 is specifically noted as having a strange interaction involving television, and I believe this is an instance of it learning and educating itself, which is what we see happening during the intercut programs that appear all over Season 2. Shortly after, Dr. Trados also identifies that each singularity has a distinct personality and individual consciousness. On December 3rd, the UN representatives arrive to appraise the research. During this, though, the singularity speaks out, calling for a symbiotic relationship where they work together, and unfortunately, Dr. Trados and the UN representatives fall for it. But it's entirely likely that the UN representatives were still part of the cult. The cult never actually went away. About 2 years later, on September 22nd, 1994, Vincent's man on the inside, who goes by the initial B, finally agrees to begin sending him tapes and confidential information, as he begins to notice the deteriorating state of Carcass as an organization. Considering he's the manager of the files department, Bruce probably received Vincent's original message to Carcass, which explains why they clearly have an established point of contact. Just over a week later, Dr. Brones has his fieldwork approved that he always wanted to do with mimics. This occurs in the same neighborhood where Vincent's father, Chris, and Janice were all murdered. Over the years, this same mimic turned into an elder mimic, terrorizing Brones for a month before claiming his life as well, despite him desperately hoping he'd be saved by Carcass. This is because the singularities have begun recommending terminations of low-performance employees, and these terminations seem to be lethal in nature. All this time, Bruce Phoenix, manager of the files department, has been smuggling information to Vincent behind the scenes. On February 1st, 1995, Bruce asks Vincent to check on Dr. Brones, which is when he discovers his body and the camcorder he secretly stowed. This is when Vincent and Bruce both realize just how dire the situation really is. By April 3rd, and throughout the next few months, seismic activity is noted in various places, mainly at Facility Zero and Carcass HQ. As well as this, the general opinion of the Vita Carnis noticeably begins to shift back into favor, and the riots subside. At the request of the singularities, Carcass begins to develop specific satellite technology and a strange gateway, the purpose of which we still don't understand. The cult sends Carcass a letter offering their full support and fidelity in assisting them, which we can only assume they accepted. It's at this point where the two organizations essentially become one. Sometime after July 1995, Dr. Trados discovers that Bruce has been tampering with files and sending them to an outside source. Bruce's loyalty to humanity prevents him from spilling Vincent's identity, but unfortunately, his disloyalty to Carcass results in his assassination. Realizing this with the last of Bruce's file collection, Vincent puts a plan into action to infiltrate and destroy Carcass on his own. On August 22nd, 1995, their records indicate the need to bring in a newly hired data engineer, which is actually Vincent in disguise. Upon arriving, he sets fire to their files and servers, but becomes trapped in the observation room and caught red-handed by the singularities. After a rousing speech, he's spared and freed out of respect for his ambition, knowing that there's nothing he can do to stop them now. From there, the singularities abandon their human benefactors who foolishly assisted them and proceed to cause mass destruction and create, or perhaps incite, the return of an eldritch abomination. With the third and final chapter missing, this is where our current understanding of the story of Vita Carnis comes to an uncertain end. Only time will tell what is in store, but someday, I hope I have the privilege of telling you all the full story. Over the past few years, it has become increasingly common to see a certain sentiment be paraded online. Analog horror is dead. And I won't lie, it's definitely impossible to deny that its golden age has become a bygone memory. But it's exactly because of series like Vita Carnis that the idea never truly dies. I'm extremely grateful towards Darian for what we've been given. Putting together this video reignited the love I felt for this series 2 years ago all over again. And for that, I can say with confidence that Vita Carnis is my favorite analog horror. I want this to be a lesson to any aspiring creators out there. I know for a fact that Darian never expected to get this far, and nobody ever really does. People get caught up in thinking that a story has to be perfect or it shouldn't be made at all. There are still millions of people who want to see more analog horror. If you've always wanted to make one of your own, I guarantee at least one of those people will fall in love with it. But it has to exist first. Go make that story. We're all waiting patiently for you. If you've made it this far into the video, you've already done plenty to support what I do, so I'd just like to say thanks so much for watching. If you want to show further support, you can subscribe to the channel, join the Discord server, and once again, I absolutely urge you all to go support Darian in any way you can. This video wouldn't exist without all of his hard work. Please subscribe to his channel. It'll all be at the top of the description. Anyways, that's gonna be all from me. I hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time.
Who's knocking at my door? Love has come to say that we must part. Be still, my heart. Just read those eyes, trembling lips that don't know where to start. Even though you know they're telling lies, be still, my heart. I hear the rumbling of a drum. Love bids her come and she must go. She